What makes corned beef corned? Why is the can shaped like that? What kind of beef is it exactly? If you're embarrassed to ask these questions of anyone else, we've got ya. Corned beef's name is a little bit confusing. Why? Well, the product contains no corn. The corned in the name refers to the rock salt used to preserve the beef. The word corn comes from the Proto-Germanic word for a seed or piece of grain, kernum. Large chunks of rock salt are roughly the size of a kernel of grain, so they came to be called salt corns. This use of the word is very old, with the first written instance of corn dating back to the 800s. According to Bon Appetit, English speakers used corn as a generic name for any type of grain long before they encountered maize in the New World. When indigenous people in the Americas showed Europeans their staple crop, the colonists initially dubbed it Indian corn. This name stuck until the 19th century. English importers started to use the word corned beef to describe Irish salted meat in the 1600s. That means corned beef had its name for almost 2 centuries before Americans started calling maize corn. Spam has an illustrious history as a military ration. The U.S. Armed Forces fed 150 million pounds of the canned ham product to its troops during World War II. Canned meat has its obvious advantages for combat use. It doesn't require refrigeration and can be eaten without cooking.
I don't like spam! Oh, don't make a fuss, dear. I'll have your spam. I love it. I'm having spam.
So how did spam lead to the popularity of canned corned beef? According to the Jewish News, the Israeli Defense Forces wanted to feed tinned meat to their conscripts, but they had a problem. Spam wasn't kosher because it's pork. After World War II, the Israeli Defense Forces developed their own kosher canned corned beef called loof. It continued to serve loof to soldiers through the early 21st century because the product could last decades if stored correctly. One Israeli soldier said in 2011 that he ate a can of loof made before he was born. The familiar rectangular or trapezoidal corned beef can that U.S. consumers are familiar with was patented in Chicago by Arthur A. Libby in 1875. The distinctive shape allows corned beef cans to stack more efficiently than round cans. This made it ideal for the military as it reduced shipping costs. Although corned beef's heyday as an army food is now decades in the past, manufacturers haven't found a reason to mess with a formula that has worked for over 100 years. A perfectly rectangular can would stack just as well as a trapezoidal can, but the irregular shape of a corned beef tin serves a purpose besides conserving space. The can's shape allows the delicate minced meat to slide out of its package without breaking. Despite the advantages of this can design, no other product has adopted the trapezoidal tin. If you see that can on a shelf, you know exactly what's going to be inside it. Although corned beef has its roots in Europe, the Philippines might love it more than any other country. Canned corned beef is one of the most popular breakfast foods there. It fills a similar cultural role to bacon in the U.S. The combination of fried corned beef, white rice, and eggs is a classic Filipino breakfast. Part of the country's affection for the product might be that their version is better than the kind available in most of the world. Outside of the Philippines, most canned corned beef is made from finely minced meat. Filipinos use a brand from New Zealand called Palm that's made of shredded beef and has a texture similar to pulled pork. Although corned beef isn't as popular in the US as it is in the Philippines, it's still a fairly common breakfast option stateside. According to The Nibble in America, most canned corned beef is consumed in the form of corned beef hash, a mid-century diner favorite that combines minced salt beef with diced potatoes and other seasonings. Ireland has a long history of raising cattle for dairy production, but beef has not traditionally been a popular meat in the region. The ancient pre-Christian Gaelic religion believed cows were sacred, and most Irish farmers preferred to keep their cows alive to produce milk rather than slaughtering them. Expensive beef was mostly consumed by the highest levels of ancient Irish society, with most of the country's residents eating pork as their animal protein of choice.
What can I say? I am a man of great taste.
Very funny.
Ireland didn't produce beef on a mass scale until it was conquered by England in the 1500s, and the English conquerors started raising cattle to export back home. The English Parliament forbade the export of fresh beef from Ireland in the 17th century, so landowners switched to selling corned beef. As a result, the Irish city of Cork dominated global corned beef production for almost 2 centuries. We have the French Revolution to thank for the invention of canned food. The revolutionary government sought a way to deliver food to its troops at home and abroad while avoiding spoilage. Multi-hyphenate kitchen inventor Nicolas Appert figured out that food boiled for 5 hours in sealed containers would stay fresh indefinitely. The British wasted almost no time in stealing Appert's idea, patenting an improvement to his method in 1810, the same year he publicized his new technology. While Appert relied on glass jars, the British used iron canisters coated with tin to make them rust-resistant. There was only one problem: no one invented a tool to open the new cans. The first patent for a can opener in the US is from 1858, over 40 years after canned food had become a popular military ration. Before that, cans came with instructions that told users to open with a hammer and chisel. Sometimes, desperate servicemen would shoot their corned beef to get it open. When the first self-opening corned beef can debuted in 1866, it paved the way for corned beef to become a household staple instead of merely a wartime necessity. Modern corned beef production was spurred by the English conquest of Ireland, and the British Empire spread the product across many of the regions it ruled. The English rulers of Ireland made so much money from selling salted beef that they were even permitted to sell it to England's enemy, France. Both the French and the English supplied their colonial holdings with corned beef, exporting it to Africa and the Americas. As Time notes in an exploration of the history of Spam in Asia, former colonies have a fraught relationship with the canned meats that were introduced by conquering powers. Canned meat often showed up in tandem with violence, but it also served as vital sustenance during lean times. In an era when many people in the countries that invented canned meat view it with disdain, cooks in places like the Philippines embraced canned corned beef as an integral part of the national food identity. In recent years, Western consumers have embraced the delicious canned meat recipes that Asian cooks innovated because of necessity. Irish corned beef production diminished at the end of the 19th century. By the start of World War II, South America had replaced Ireland as the leading producer of corned beef. During the first half of the 20th century, Uruguay led the way, making 16 million tins of corned beef in 1943. The drive to produce more cattle for corned beef is a leading contributor to Amazon deforestation in Brazil. Cattle ranchers who raise meat for Brazilian firm JBS have been linked to the illegal destruction of large swaths of the Amazon rainforest. According to Dig Jamaica, Jamaica joined several other countries in temporarily banning all imports of Brazilian corned beef in 2017. The ban was triggered after an investigation found that some Brazilian meat producers had been selling spoiled products and paying off inspectors to avoid detection. Deli-style sliced corned beef is typically made from beef brisket, but the cuts of meat used for the canned stuff are mysterious. A breakdown of the nutritional content of Hormel corned beef on Innit reveals that the product contains just 6 ingredients. The list is surprisingly short for a shelf-stable processed food, consisting mostly of stuff you would recognize from a home kitchen, with a couple of preservatives added. Despite this apparent simplicity, the beef component of the recipe could come from almost any part of the cow, including some cuts that people don't customarily eat as food in the U.S. U.S. law permits products labeled as beef to contain diaphragm, esophagus, blood vessels, nerves, sinew, and skin. It's not allowed to, quote, include significant portions of bone, but it's permissible to have, quote, the portions of bone, which normally accompany the muscle tissue. No amount of brain is allowed in beef due to the risk of mad cow disease. These rules give a lot of wiggle room for meat packers to decide what exactly the beef in corned beef is composed of, although they do exclude organ meats like liver, lungs, and tripe. You may be hesitant to consume mystery meat like canned corned beef, but if you've ever eaten a hot dog or a Slim Jim, you've likely already eaten parts of an animal you would never cook at home.
Need a long statement? Never do it, Slim Jim!
Like most cured meats, canned corned beef uses a small amount of sodium nitrite as a preservative. The BBC explains that sodium nitrite helps kill bacteria during the curing process, allowing the meat to be safely stored at room temperature. The chemical also changes the color of the meat, making it stay pink even when fully cooked. Although the nitrites in cured meats protect us from food poisoning, they may have negative long-term health effects. People who consume a moderate amount of preserved meat every day are only slightly more likely to develop cancer, and nitrites aren't the only potential carcinogen lurking in red meat. Furthermore, most of the nitrites in a typical person's diet occur in vegetables rather than meats. These nitrites may actually improve cardiovascular fitness. The health effects of nitrites are complex, and more research is necessary to unpack their risks and potential benefits. That said, corned beef is still best enjoyed as an occasional treat, as it contains big doses of sodium and saturated fat in addition to the nitrites. Libby's canned pumpkin starts taking over supermarket shelves when the leaves turn. It satisfies Americans' annual autumnal cravings for pumpkin desserts. Although you can cook and puree your own pumpkin to make pie, most people rely on the ease and consistent flavor of the canned stuff. Libby's is made from a special variety of squash called Dickinson pumpkin that can only be grown in the region around Morton, Illinois. This extra sweet pumpkin makes for the perfect pie filling. But before Libby's was in the pumpkin business, the Libby's Corporation started as a corned beef canning operation, run by Arthur and Charles Libby along with their business partner Archibald McNeil. Founded in 1868, the company pioneered many innovations in the canned beef industry, including the tapered can and refrigerated trucks. The company began branching out into other canned goods in the early 1900s, selling sauerkraut, A1 sauce, fruits, and vegetables. Libby's bought the company behind canned Dickinson pumpkin in 1930, and it's been known by the Libby's name ever since. As we've discussed already, the British invented canned corned beef as a way to preserve and export Ireland's cattle in the early 19th century. Jewish deli corned beef, the sliced cured brisket you order piled high on rye with spicy mustard, has a much older history. Curing meat in brine has been a Jewish tradition since ancient Hebrews started pickling meat to eat during Tisha B'Av, a commemoration of the destruction of the Temple in Jerusalem. At the time, priests thought that the curing process made the meat less celebratory and more suitable for the somber holiday. This tradition of cured red meat continued all the way through the 1800s, when Jewish Germans ran delicatessens inspired by the charcuterie shops of France. When German Jews began fleeing en masse to America to avoid persecution in their home country, they opened delis all over the U.S. that served corned beef brisket. These Jewish immigrants often settled in neighborhoods close to Irish migrants who had escaped the potato famine. The Irish, many of whom had been workers in the corned beef industry before they immigrated, began buying corned beef brisket from kosher butchers. This ultimately solidified it as Irish food in the American imagination.
McDonald's definitely stumbled onto something special with the McRib, that saucy rib-shaped sandwich that always seems to come and go from the McDonald's menu.
It's back, because you love the taste of barbecued pork with pickles and onions on a home-style bun.
So what's the deal with the McRib? You might think you know what's going on between the buns, but you don't know the whole story. Food science. Getting a McRib to look like a cute little rack of ribs may seem like modern sorcery, but its roots actually go way back to the 70s, when animal science professor Roger Mandigo was approached by the National Pork Producers Council. You know, the guys behind these commercials.
Pork, the other white meat.
They wanted Mandigo to come up with a way to make shaped pork out of pork trimmings to sell in fast food restaurants, specifically McDonald's. Mandigo basically took the sausage-making method and revamped it using salts and other additives to hold everything in place. His first concoction was shaped like a pork chop. McDonald's asked for something people would actually want on a bun and requested that the Frankenpork resembled the boneless part of a back rib. And thus, the McRib was born. Rubber ribs. You've probably heard the stories floating around the internet about how the McRib is made out of the same stuff as a rubber gym mat.
You work hard, you do what you're told, and what does life serve you? A shame sandwich.
Fortunately, it turns out that's not exactly the case. Lopez Foods Vice President Kevin Nanke says the McRib contains only a few ingredients.
It's pork, water, salt, dextrose, which is a type of sugar, and preservatives, which are BHA, propyl gallate, and citric acid.
Azodicarbonamide, the offending gym mat ingredient, isn't in the official ingredients McDonald's rattles off on their website. So save your sweating for the actual gym mats, not your lunch. Back from bedrock. Despite its popularity today, the McRib wasn't always the rousing success you might think. Due to low sales and rising pork prices, the McRib disappeared from the menu in 1985. The first real comeback didn't happen until 1994, and it was all thanks to the Flintstones movie, of all things. You may recall the closing credits of the cartoon The Flintstones featuring a giant rack of ribs.
From the town of Bedrock, they're a page right out of history.
So when the Flintstones movie premiered in 1994, McDonald's had the idea to bring back their rib sandwich and tie it into the movie's release. Oh, and pork prices were down again. That helped too. Artificial hype. So despite all the hype, why doesn't McDonald's just keep the McRib on the menu all the time? The bottom line is that McDonald's doesn't sell enough of them to justify the supply cost. So McDonald's did what they're very good at. They created an advertising campaign that made the McRib seem more special than it actually is.
Lois! Lois, it's back!
I heard, Peter. I heard!
Kids, it's happening! Get your coats! This is what we practiced for!
After a few false starts in the early 2000s, McDonald's announced a farewell tour for the McRib with a new strategy. They created a fake petition website for the McRib and made some commercials for the fictional Boneless Pig Farmers Association of America.
Stand up for the boneless pigs, because they can't stand up for themselves.
Despite how ridiculous it all sounds now, it actually worked. Laugh all you want, but the success is in the profits. And the McRib is a cult hero now. Even better, McDonald's can just roll it out whenever pork prices dip, like in November when that usually happens.
Shout it from the rooftops, America, the McRib is back.
Salty solution. The McRib is one of the saltiest items McDonald's offers, and there's a reason for that, even if it's not very appetizing. The process to form the McRib involves using salt to extract proteins and using those to bind the meats together into a shape. And it takes a whole lot of salt to pull that trick off. One McRib will provide you with 36% of your daily intake of salt. Leftover buns. That hoagie-style bun may seem like an outlier in the McDonald's family of foods, but it's actually a leftover from another attempt at making a non-hamburger addition to the menu. A few years before the McRib hit stores, McDonald's tested a chopped beef steak sandwich, a concoction of chopped beef steak and onions on a hoagie-style roll. The beef steak sandwich never made it out of a small testing stage, despite getting a few commercials on national TV. The only thing that remains of the beef steak is the bun, but now it has sesame seeds on top and a chunk of pork inside. The McApp. Despite the tomfoolery McDonald's employed to get it going, the McRib craze is real today. Now there's even a website dedicated to finding locations that still carry it. That way you can drive hundreds of miles to get a pork sandwich. Alternatively, you can download the app and just pull up the location on the fly. Sure, they aren't exactly the highest rated apps around, but if you're desperate for a salty processed McRib, you're probably willing to take a few chances.
That people will risk, maybe not life and limb, but a barbecue-stained shirt to have one.
Have you ever wondered where the concept for Oreo cookies came from, or why they've reached an almost cult-like status? With more than 450 billion Oreo cookies sold since their inception in 1912, it's safe to say they've earned the America's favorite cookie moniker. But it's not just the US who prefers to twist, lick, and dunk their cookies. Oreo cookies can be found in 100 countries worldwide and is the best-selling cookie brand of the 21st century. Pour yourself a glass of ice-cold milk and digest some wonder-filled facts about this iconic sandwich cookie. Where did that name come from? The Oreo cookie has gone through quite a few name changes over the past century. When they were first introduced in 1912, they were known simply as the Oreo biscuit. Then in 1921, the cookie embraced its shape and was renamed the Oreo sandwich. In 1937, they took a highbrow turn and assumed the name Oreo cream sandwich. The final name change came in 1974 when the cookie became known as the Oreo chocolate sandwich cookie, or Oreo for short. It's possible the name Oreo came from or, the French word for gold, which was the original package color. Or it could be a simple derivation of the words cream and chocolate.
Creamy McMuncher with Oreo.
Knockoff cookie. Food scientist Sam J. Porcello, aka Mr. Oreo, invented the newer version of the delicious, creamy, pasty, stick-together filling that's become such a staple of the cookie aisle. But they may not have been all that original. In 1908, 4 years prior to the launch of Oreos, Sunshine Biscuits released a sandwich cookie called Hydrox. Unfortunately for Hydrox cookies, the brand got lost among the buying and selling of its parent companies and the marketing genius of Oreos, leading them to disappear from store shelves. Now, thanks to Leaf Brands, the Hydrox is back and are ready to defend their America's original title. High-class biscuits. In 1912, alongside Mother Goose biscuits and Veronese biscuits, Oreo biscuits made up the biscuit trio. The trio was a variety of the highest-class biscuits available to consumers, a nod to the English biscuits served at tea time. The cookies were seen as an exciting innovation, and the executives at Nabisco were sure they had 3 surefire hits. They were 1/3 right. Oreos were the only cookie of the trio to survive. Double stuff? As with all mass-produced food, the perfect ratio of an Oreo cookie is down to an exact science. So, what about the double stuff Oreo? Is it double the filling, as the name suggests? Not quite. According to calculations done by one math teacher, the double stuff is actually closer to 1.86 times stuff. If you really want to eat a double stuff, just stack the cream side of 2 regular-sized Oreo together. And who hasn't done that? The giant Oreo. How many Oreo cookies are too many? In the middle of the 1980s, the answer was simple. Just one Oreo. In 1984, Nabisco launched the Oreo Big Stuff. Individually wrapped, the snack was a whopping 316 calories and took around 20 minutes to eat. For comparison, a single Oreo contains roughly 53 calories. The cookie was eventually phased out. Accidentally vegan? The original recipe for Oreo cookies contained lard, which made them unsuitable for vegans, and they were most definitely not kosher. But with the changing climate of the low-fat 1990s, Nabisco decided it was finally time to get rid of the lard and become kosher.
Bright ideas and an Oreo cookie.
It took more than 3 years to convert their equipment, and with the change brought an unexpected yet welcoming side effect. Oreo cookies were now vegan. Or are they? Spoon University initially revealed the possibility of the cookies being cross-contaminated with milk. Additionally, the sugar in a batch of Oreo cookies may be refined with bone char, an animal-derived natural charcoal. PETA-less Oreo ice cream cones and 100-calorie Thin Crisps as vegan products, the original cookie and many of its flavor offshoots are nowhere to be found. Oreo beer. Oreo cookies have infiltrated the likes of pie crust, churros, and ice cream cones, not to mention the creation of an onslaught of cookies and cream products. Is it any wonder that the classic flavor has finally made its way into the beer aisle as well? In January 2017, Virginia-based The Vale Brewing Company released a version of their chocolate milk stout called Hornswoggle that was infused with actual Oreo cookies. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the beer was sold out within a week, because apparently there's a rampant desire for a cookie-based buzz out there. Considering how prolific Oreo's various flavor profiles have become, don't be too surprised if you start seeing Oreo beers hit shelves in the near future as a result of this experiment gone right.
Fireball came seemingly out of nowhere to quickly become one of the most popular alcoholic beverages around. The brand has skyrocketed to record-soaring numbers and has somehow turned into a go-to brand among a broad demographic, from college students to grandparents. Here's the untold truth of the cinnamon whiskey. There's one thing you should know about Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey before you open a bottle. It's not really whiskey. Just about anywhere in the world, a spirit needs to be at least 40% alcohol by volume, or ABV, in order to legally be called whiskey. So why is Fireball allowed to be called whiskey? Regulations in Canada, where the spirit is distilled, dictate that anything labeled, quote, Canadian whiskey must meet the 40% ABV threshold. There is no such rule, however, about products simply labeled whiskey. These spirits just need to be made from a whiskey base. Fireball is made by adding cinnamon flavoring to traditional Canadian whiskey. Therefore, it is legally allowed to be called whiskey, just not Canadian whiskey. In the United States, meanwhile, flavored whiskey is allowed to be designated as such so long as it is at least 60 proof, 30% ABV, and the predominant flavor is included in the name. Add all of these rules together, and you now know why it's called Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey.
I haven't had a drink of whiskey or slept in the bed in 10 days. Give me a bottle.
It's easy to think that Fireball is a relatively new product, but while its popularity may have skyrocketed in recent years, the spicy booze has actually been around for over 30 years. What we know today as Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey was originally developed in the mid-1980s by the Canadian beverage company Joseph E. Seagram & Sons. It was known back then as Dr. McGillicuddy's Fireball Whiskey, part of a product line of flavored schnapps that still exists today. Dr. McGillicuddy was a completely fictional person, in case you're wondering. For many years, the cinnamon liqueur was primarily sold north of the border. In 1989, the American-based Sazerac Company purchased the rights to the entire Dr. McGillicuddy line of spirits and attempted to increase sales in the United States. As part of an advertising stunt, Sazerac paid a town in North Dakota to temporarily change its name to McGillicuddy City in exchange for $100,000, according to the Associated Press. While the promotion may have helped put the rural community on the map, there's no proof it helped sell any more schnapps. In fact, it would take another decade before the brand cinnamon whiskey became a household name. If it feels to you like Fireball whiskey came out of nowhere, you're right. Although the alcoholic beverage we know as Fireball has been around for decades, its name and branding are much more recent creations. After the Sazerac Company purchased the rights to what was then known as Dr. McGillicuddy's Fireball Whiskey in 1989, it didn't alter much of anything about the liqueur. That all changed in 2007, when the company rebranded the drink as Fireball Cinnamon Whiskey, gave it a new logo, and unleashed a cross-country grassroots marketing campaign. As part of the sales push, company representatives visited local bars bars, giving away free shots, and interacting with employees on social media. A Sazerac company spokesman told the Huffington Post, "We don't go into bars and hire girls and force people to take a shot. What we have been doing is pushing engagement with people in the industry, particularly bartenders. Whatever they were doing, it was working." Fireball whiskey went from being unheard of to the drink of choice at parties and bars nationwide, all within a few short years. According to Bravo, from 2011 to 2013, Fireball sales increased by nearly $60 million, and those figures only accounted for bottle sales from retail stores, not drink purchases at bars. Once Fireball got its new name and logo, it was off and running. According to The Motley Fool, sales of Fireball jumped from less than $2 million in 2011 to $131 million in 2014. The latter total made it the 7th most popular liquor brand in the United States, according to CNN. But the $131 million figure only accounted for bottle sales from the shelf, not drink purchases at bars, where Fireball was an even hotter commodity. Bar sales of the cinnamon liqueur that same year accounted for roughly $530 million in additional revenue, for an estimated sum of $863.5 million, double its total from the year before. While Fireball isn't sneaking up on anyone these days, and it's no longer the shiny new bottle behind the bar, it's still on the rise. The Beverage Information and Insights Group reported that Fireball sales increased by nearly 8% from 2018 to 2019. This continued growth has established the flavored whiskey as one of the most popular alcoholic beverages, not just in America, but around the globe. According to VinePair, Fireball is among the world's 30 most popular spirits and the 4th best-selling liqueur, behind only Bailey's, Jägermeister, and Fernet Branca. Fireball's catapulted rise hit a momentary blip several years ago, thanks to some unflattering headlines out of Europe. In October 2014, Norway, Sweden, and Finland recalled the liqueur for having excessive levels of propylene glycol, an ingredient also found in antifreeze. It turns out the whole ordeal was much ado about nothing. Unbeknownst to most, propylene glycol is commonly used as a flavor enhancer in food and drinks.
It helps to sort of add a little consistency and prevent coagulation in certain products, so a lot of icings, a lot of cake products.
Although propylene glycol has been declared safe by authorities in both the US and Europe, the former allows for higher levels of the ingredient. Therefore, there are 2 different Fireball recipes for North America and Europe. Norway, Sweden, and Finland were shipped the wrong batch of the liqueur, which contained an illegal amount of propylene glycol and had to be pulled from the shelves. The company stated at the time, "Unfortunately, Fireball shipped its North American formula to Europe and found that one ingredient is out of compliance with European regulations. Unfortunately for Fireball, the damage was done. To this day, you'll still find people asking if the spirit contains antifreeze. The company is clearly a little bitter about the situation." On its FAQ page, it makes this clear. Fireball does not contain any antifreeze at all. And the suggestion is ridiculous. Sadly, this is the media's way of crafting attention-grabbing headlines, but it simply is not true. You know you've reached success when others start trying to copy you, and that's precisely what happened to Fireball. Not long after the spicy liqueur became a mainstay behind every bar, did other spirit companies try to get in on the cinnamon whiskey trend. There was Sinfire Cinnamon Whiskey from Hood River Distillers and Stout Brewing Company's Fire Flask. Sazerac, Fireball's parent company, sued both for trademark infringement, according to the spirit business. Then the big boys entered the picture. In 2014, Jim Beam unveiled Kentucky Fire, a red-hot cinnamon liqueur. Chris Potter, general manager of whiskeys at Beam Suntory, said in a press release, "We've led the category in flavor innovation in recent years, but our latest flavor certainly turns up the heat. We're thrilled with the initial excitement we've seen for Jim Beam Kentucky Fire." A year later, Jack Daniel's introduced its Tennessee Fire Cinnamon Whiskey, a mix of 2 of the brand's pre-existing spirits, Old No. 7 Tennessee Whiskey and cinnamon liqueur. According to the Los Angeles Times, it was Jack Daniel's first new flavor since 2011. Tennessee Fire didn't go unnoticed by Sazerac. The manufacturer sued Jack Daniel's for allegedly using Google advertising to send users looking for Fireball to search result pages for Tennessee Fire, according to the spirit business. Let's be honest, no one drinks alcohol for its nutritional value. We all know booze isn't great for our health, so if one particular drink has a few more calories or a little extra sugar, it's not going to raise many red flags. But you should know what you're getting into when you drink Fireball, because the sweetened spirit doesn't just have a little more sugar than most drinks, it has a lot more. The process of making Fireball begins with the base of Canadian whiskey. Then comes the sweet stuff. This includes real cinnamon as well as sugar. Just how much sugar? 1 shot of Fireball, about 1.5 ounces, contains a whopping 11 grams of sugar. If that doesn't sound like a lot, think again. The folks that drink spirits put the sugar content into perspective. Those 11 grams equals 0.38 ounces, which is roughly 25% of the shot. And remember, Fireball is only 33% ABV, meaning there is almost as much sugar in the sweet liqueur as there is alcohol. All that sweetness can take a toll on your body. According to GQ, sugary drinks are more likely to cause hangovers and less likely to provide the desired tipsy effect. Fireball's meteoric rise has made it popular with just about every demographic, from college students to their grandmas. But there may be no group of people who enjoy drinking the cinnamon liqueur, or at least singing about, more than country music artists. The whiskey is name-dropped in a number of country songs, including Blake Shelton's Buzzin' and Florida Georgia Line's Round Here. The latter group in particular has a special fondness for Fireball. According to Vice, the duo regularly takes shots of the whiskey on stage, so much so that the drink is unofficially the official drink of Florida Georgia Line. And let's not forget about Taylor Swift. The ultra-popular singer may not enjoy Fireball as much as Florida Georgia Line, but it appears as if she's been known to indulge in the cinnamon liqueur every so often. In 2018, Swift joined famed country music songwriter Craig Wiseman on stage at Nashville's Bluebird Cafe. According to the Tennessean, Wiseman told the crowd a story about an after-party he held following the CMT Awards. When Swift arrived, she requested access to the Fireball whiskey shot room. Wiseman said, "I got her a shot of Fireball, and then I got her another one. For the rest of the party, I would go get a shot of Fireball. I don't even know if she took it, but it disappeared." The two laughed it off with shots of Fireball before getting back to the music. You can't reach the highest level of the popularity stratosphere these days without going viral. Fortunately for Fireball, a number of popular videos featuring the cinnamon liqueur have been widely circulated around the internet in recent years. GQ even asked actor Chris Pratt to film a video in which he provides acting advice. He chose to do so after taking several shots of Fireball, even taking one while filming. The clip has since garnered more than 2 million views on YouTube.
Let's say you forget about your spouse's birthday and they confront you about it. Simple. You just be honest.
Fireball does a great job creating its own video content, consistently producing them for its platforms. As you can imagine, the company releases quite a bit of spooky-themed vids around Halloween. So there's no shortage of Fireball shots and creative videos to promote the brand and entertain customers. Keep them coming, Fireball. We like your style. Fireball has become one of the go-to shots for partiers, meaning it's easy for a group to run out of the cinnamon liqueur. The company came up with a solution to that problem. In September, the brand started selling the Fire Keg, which is filled with a whopping 5 liters of Fireball. For those uninterested in crunching numbers, 5 liters equals 115 shots of the spicy spirit, more than enough to keep you and your friends busy for quite some time. It comes with 3 pouring spouts to prevent any in-party jostling. The Fire Keg retails for roughly $75 and is now available for purchase at retailers across the country. The Fire Keg isn't the only party-related Fireball product, however. The company also sells a pack of 30 25-milliliter prepackaged shots known as Peel and Party shots, as well as a party bucket of 20 50-milliliter Fireball bottles.
Omaha Steaks Incorporated advertises that it serves up the best cuts of beef straight from America's heartland. From its humble beginnings up to a huge expansion into new markets, it's not just mail order anymore. This is the untold truth of Omaha Steaks. Believe it or not, Omaha Steaks hasn't always been the meat industry mainstay it is today. The Omaha Steaks story begins not in Omaha, Nebraska, but actually in Latvia during the 19th century. When the Simon family fled Latvia due to fervent anti-Semitism in the country, they eventually wound up in Omaha, where they were among the first Jewish people to make their way into the city. The Simon family patriarch J.J. Simon and his son B.A. worked together as butchers, which was the family trade back in their European homeland, founding the Table Supply Meat Company in downtown Omaha in 1917. The company grew in popularity among local Omahans. The business eventually changed its name to Omaha Steaks in 1966 as the company expanded to sell their product in other states via the Union Pacific Railroad. More than 100 years after Omaha Steaks' beginnings as a company, the food delivery service has grown all across the nation, raking in around $500 million in revenue each year. According to the Omaha Steaks website, the company has become the country's largest direct response marketer of beef and gourmet food. Talk about living out the American dream. In the company's century-long history, Omaha Steaks has remained a Simon family enterprise for generations. The current CEO and owner, Bruce Simon, is the great-great-grandson of Omaha Steaks founder J.J. Simon. Simon has grown up in the family business and used to accompany his father to the plant as a child before working there during summer breaks from high school and college. This made Bruce Simon a natural choice to step into the position, as he had served various other positions within the company until 1994, when he became president and CEO.
We love customers like you.
Unlike other meat industry giants like Tyson Foods and Oscar Mayer, Omaha Steaks remains a privately owned company, meaning that investors cannot purchase shares of Omaha Steaks. While going public is typically looked at as a huge accomplishment for any major company, remaining a private family-owned business has allowed the company to focus more on its long-term strategies rather than constantly worrying about quarterly earnings. The name Omaha Steaks is admittedly quite a bit misleading. While beef might be what comes to mind when you first hear the company's name, you might be surprised to find that you can actually get a much wider range of specialty products. In the 1960s, Omaha Steaks began expanding its catalog from only offering steaks to also include premium cuts of pork, poultry, and seafood. Since then, they've added an even more extensive range of products to the menu, as the company's delivery services have become much more widespread. While steaks are still the prime cut of meat at Omaha Steaks, you can actually purchase a huge range of products besides their signature beef as well. From Polish-style kielbasa to hearty wild halibut fillets, they've even got an expansive line of side dishes to serve alongside the main course, including charcuterie selections and potato-based side dishes as well as some decadent wines. Ever wonder how Omaha Steaks manages to keep their products fresh even while they're shipping them all the way across the country? Raw meat is not exactly the easiest thing to transport thanks to its tendency to spoil. So how does Omaha do it?
What's colder than dry ice? I don't know.
When the company began its mail-order operations in 1952, they settled on using wax-lined cartons filled with dry ice to keep the meat cool, essentially mimicking a refrigerator. As polystyrene and vacuum packaging became more popular and mainstream, Omaha Steaks ditched the wax-lined containers and began using those, in conjunction with dry ice, as a means of keeping the meat cool. Vacuum packaging ensures that the meat has no exposure to air, and thus bacteria, while the dry ice keeps the temperature down low without requiring any electricity. That means high-quality steaks that haven't gone rancid on you in the mail. Does your dog whine and beg every time you throw a steak on the grill? Next time you stock up on some Omaha Steaks, you might want to consider grabbing some of their signature dog treats, which the company added to their inventory around 17 years ago. As the New York Times reported in 2004, customers were constantly telling the company's management that they were feeding scraps from their Omaha Steaks products to their dogs and cats. Eventually, the company gave in and decided to capitalize on their popularity with pets and began making dog treats themselves in 2003. Now, these pet treats aren't some downgraded, poor-quality meat scraps left over from the higher-quality cuts of meat meant for humans. Omaha Steaks uses the same high-quality beef to make their dog treats, creating a product that actually resembles the company's beef jerky, just with a lot less salt. Omaha Steaks is quite well known for its lavish and pricey boxes of food. Boxes like their gourmet stock-up package, which features filet mignon, sirloin, chicken breast, other meats and side dishes, will cost you a couple of $100s. While these are great deals if you have a lot of mouths to feed, chances are you don't need to be spending that much on some fancy meat that you probably can't get rid of fast enough. That said, Omaha Steaks has plenty of more reasonable packages for the everyday diner. If you're willing to do a little shopping, $20 can actually go a long way over at Omaha Steaks. For starters, it's not hard to find at least a couple of promotional sales on their website. But also, you can typically grab a pack of 8 sausages for around $20. The same goes for certain cuts of beef, like their tenderloin tips. But what's the point of a cheap steak if it doesn't taste any good? As Business Insider reported, the quality of what you get at Omaha Steaks typically surpasses that of what you can find in your local supermarket. If you've got the extra cash to spare and want to go to a local butcher or steakhouse, then of course you can't beat that. But Omaha Steaks might just be the next best thing. Perhaps you've gotten a call or two from a robocaller at Omaha Steaks trying to sell you on their holiday gift box special that's stuffed to the brim with gourmet hamburgers and tri-tips galore. Well, in 2014, one man in Gresham, Oregon had received just one call too many. According to the Oregonian, Michael Hetherington received 10 unwanted calls to his cell phone from the company over the course of a little more than a month in 2013. Hetherington did some research on laws surrounding telemarketing and realized that the company could be breaching the Telephone Consumer Protection Act of 1991. The act essentially states that companies aren't allowed to call customers without their permission or use automated programs to dial up random numbers. There's also an added emphasis in regards to protecting cell phone numbers. This is exactly what Omaha Steaks was doing when they called Hetherington those 10 times, and he filed a lawsuit against them in 2014. The lawsuit grew into a wider class action suit and was eventually settled about 2 years later in 2016, when the company had to shell out $5 million to customers they'd called in violation of the TCPA. According to Top Class Actions, a website investigating various class action suits across the country, customers began receiving checks from Omaha Steaks for around $40 in December 2016. You're probably most familiar with the Omaha Steaks website or maybe even their mail catalogs. After all, the company is primarily known as a delivery service. But Omaha Steaks does have a handful of brick-and-mortar shops across the United States as well. According to the Omaha World Herald, the first Omaha Steaks retail store opened up in the company's hometown in 1976 as a pilot for possible similar operations throughout the country. Prior to opening up shop in downtown Omaha, customers could only purchase Omaha Steaks through the mail or at select restaurants carrying their products. Though it was a pilot project, the company didn't really begin expanding its brick-and-mortar presence beyond Nebraska for nearly a decade. In 1985, the first retail shop outside of the Cornhusker State opened up in Houston, Texas. Since then, Texas has surpassed Nebraska as the state with the most Omaha Steaks locations. The company has since opened up more than 75 locations across the nation, so if you're looking to get your hands on some Omaha Steaks and you need them fast, you may just be able to drive on down to your nearest location to stock up for the next family cookout. According to data from the National Agricultural Statistics Service, Nebraska has a grand total of 6.3 million cattle, meaning that bovines outnumber people in the Cornhusker State by 3 to 1. That's more cattle in the state than there are people in the entire city of Los Angeles. In fact, Nebraska is the state with the second highest cattle-to-people ratio, so you know why they take their beef seriously over there. According to Omaha Steaks, this beef-centric ethos is what's kept them in the state throughout their century-long history.
All Omaha Steaks are grain-fed Midwestern beef from the heart of beef country USA.
The company prides itself on sourcing all of its beef from farms throughout the heartland of the United States and not outsourcing anything from cheaper, faraway locations in South America or Australia. According to the company, all their steak products come from grass-fed, grain-finished beef. Another factor that helps boost the quality of your Omaha Steaks box set. When the COVID-19 outbreak hit the United States, a number of meat processing facilities all across the nation found themselves in the center of controversy. Workers at these plants were considered essential, and as such, many meat processing companies did not shut down their operations. One of the companies at the center of the story has been Tyson Foods, which has been linked to around 4,500 reported COVID-19 cases nationwide. Omaha Steaks didn't have Tyson-sized issues, but the company still had to take plenty of precautions. Per an April 2020 press release, Omaha Steaks continued operations at its facilities, and the company said it would be working to maintain social distancing measures at its facilities while also allowing all staff at its plants paid sick leave. As of May 2020, Omaha Steaks had not been linked to any COVID-19 cases like some of its competition. Although it may seem like a cold and distant corporate entity, at its core, Omaha Steaks still adheres to the mom-and-pop ethos that its founder, J.J. Simon, fostered when he first made his way to the United States. And a big part of that is giving back to the Omaha community. The Simon family maintains close ties to the city, carrying out various acts of service throughout Omaha and its surrounding regions. The most recent example of that? The company's response to the COVID-19 outbreak. According to local news outlets, Omaha witnessed huge spikes in unemployment in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, during the first week of April 2020 alone, more than 25,000 people filed for unemployment in the city. In response, the Omaha Downtown Improvement Group partnered up with local businesses. Omaha Steaks included to provide meals for a drive-through pantry to help out those who were struggling with unemployment as a result of the crisis. While organizers were initially looking for discounted prices on food to give out, Omaha Steaks reportedly refused to accept a single cent for any of the hamburger or pork chops that the company doled out. Is cold brew coffee just another way for Starbucks to get you to part with your hard-earned cash, or is there really something special about it? Here's what makes this slow-brewed cold coffee variety stand out from the rest of the Starbucks menu. If you're already overwhelmed by all of the options on the Starbucks menu, you may be wondering whether or not the world really needs another coffee drink to choose from. You may also be wondering just what makes cold brew different from any other cold coffee drinks already available. For starters, iced coffee and cold brew are made with entirely different brewing processes. Iced coffee is essentially hot coffee brewed at twice the strength and served over ice. In order to make a batch of cold brew, Starbucks adds its blend of coffee grounds to cool, filtered water and steeps them for 20 hours. Starbucks describes the flavor of cold brew as having, quote, the right balance of sweetness with citrusy and chocolate notes. In case you're wondering, those iced espresso beverages don't use cold brew coffee either. They're made by pouring espresso shots over cold milk or water and ice. Cold brew is something completely different, and now you know. If you thought Starbucks' 20-hour cold brew steeping process was intense, Starbucks Nitro Cold Brew takes things to the next level. The drink puts a twist on the coffee chain's traditional cold brew coffee by infusing it with nitrogen bubbles. Nitro Cold Brew comes out cold, so you won't need ice. It also comes out with a foamy top, much like beer, so you can forget the milk, sugar, and straw. The drink has built quite a following, with the Nitro Brew with Cascara Cold Foam holding the top spot in a Thyllist ranking of all the drinks on the Starbucks menu. But if you're the kind of person who needs to have your coffee supersized, you're in for a disappointment. Starbucks Nitro Cold Brew is served in tall and grande sizes only, but there's a good reason for that. The drink is not available in venti because serving it in that size would cause the drink to lose the frothiness and bubbles that make it special. From your first sip, you'll notice that Starbucks Cold Brew has a distinct flavor from the other cold coffee drinks on the menu. Everything from the beans to the special slow brewing process gives Starbucks' latest coffee creation a reason to stand out from the rest of the pack. Starbucks Cold Brew starts with a unique blend of coffee from Africa and Latin America that is specifically designed to be served cold. Because there is no heat involved in the brewing process, there is less acidity than iced coffee. And as a result, cold brew has a much smoother, full-bodied flavor, according to Starbucks. The delicious, smooth flavor of Starbucks cold brew may make you want to gulp down your drink in record time, but try to resist. Take your time to enjoy the taste, because the flavor will not change with the temperature. Unlike iced coffee, the cold brewing process helps to keep the flavor consistent. You may depend on your daily dose of coffee to give you the energy you need to get through your day, but you may not know that a lot of other good things are happening in the process. Drinking a cold brew coffee provides many of the same health benefits as hot coffee, according to Healthline. Caffeine consumption has been shown to help boost your metabolism and enhance your mood, and drinking coffee can also help protect you from serious illnesses. According to a study by Harvard Medical School, drinking 3 to 4 cups of coffee each day has been linked with a reduced risk of serious illnesses such as type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and Parkinson's disease. Is there an advantage to choosing cold brew coffee? Cold brew is 67% less acidic than other varieties, which means that it may be easier for people with sensitive stomachs to digest. And if you always add cream or milk to change the sweetness or texture of your coffee, opt for Nitro. Skip the creamer and save on some fat and calories. Starbucks brought a little fall flavor to its menu in summer 2019 when they introduced the Pumpkin Spice Cold Brew, the first new pumpkin-flavored beverage on the menu in 16 years. In case you were wondering why Starbucks would launch a new fall-inspired beverage in the summer, it probably has a lot to do with business. As Forbes reported, a Starbucks spokesperson credits the Pumpkin Spice Latte as being the company's best-selling seasonal beverage of all time. The chain has sold over 350 million as of 2018. The popularity of cold coffee has risen dramatically in the last few years, with cold drink sales at Starbucks increasing from 37% of sales in 2013 to 50% in 2019, according to NBC News. With numbers like that, it's no wonder they invented a cold brew version of the seasonal favorite. Contrary to popular opinion, espresso and dark roast coffee doesn't necessarily always have the highest levels of caffeine per serving. And the amount of caffeine in your coffee depends on everything from how your coffee is ground to the way it is brewed. If you want the biggest caffeine bang for your buck at Starbucks, it may depend on your preference. When you're in the mood for cold coffee, cold brew is definitely the way to go, as it has more caffeine per serving than a traditional iced coffee. According to the nutrition facts listed on the Starbucks website, the Grande Cold Brew contains 205 milligrams of caffeine compared to 165 milligrams of caffeine in a Grande iced coffee. But you might also want to consider that a Grande Pike Place has 310 milligrams of caffeine, so it's all down to one question: hot or cold?
Coca-Cola has reached a level of brand recognition shared only by a few other companies. And there's a good reason for that. It's everywhere. From the North Pole to the Australian outback, everyone knows that red can with the simple line. Coke has some seriously far-reaching influence, and without a doubt, when aliens land on Earth, they'll be like, "Oh, you guys have Coke too? That's cool." Believe it or not though, there are still some things you didn't know about that soda from the South. Why they took the cocaine out. There's a reason it's called Coca-Cola, and that's because it used to contain cocaine. This isn't some national secret, and although Coca-Cola tends to downplay it in favor of a more wholesome history, they actually removed the cocaine in 1903, years before they legally had to. The US government didn't ban the substance until 1914, so why did Coke jump the gun? Since it only cost a nickel a bottle, almost anyone could buy a Coke. That widespread availability led to a national panic, driven by the fear racial tensions would skyrocket thanks in large part to the segregated poor getting all hopped up on nickel Coca-Colas. Southern newspapers helped spread the fear by reporting on gangs of black men high on cocaine, taking liberties with good and proper ladies. And that's just not good PR. There is still Coca in Coke today, and while it's harmless without the Eco-9 alkaloid, it's still pretty impressive that in 2003, Coke's super secretive chemical processing facility, Stepan, imported enough coca to make more than $200 million in cocaine. The illicit extract is kept in a heavily guarded facility and known simply as merchandise number 5.
Okay, I'm gonna get your money for you. But if you don't get the President of the United States on that phone, you know what's gonna happen to you?
What?
You're gonna have to answer to the Coca-Cola Company.
Taste test hate. Coke and Pepsi have been duking it out for as long as they've both been contenders, and in the 1980s, Pepsi introduced what Slate called one of the greatest marketing coups of all time, the Pepsi Challenge. It was a double-blind taste test, and predictably, Pepsi always came out on top. Coke thought they needed to adjust to consumers' new and evolving tastes, and that led to the disaster that was New Coke. Actually, what they really needed was science on their side. Researchers from the Baylor College of Medicine recreated the taste tests, with subjects hooked up to an MRI machine. They found that when people knew what they were drinking, Pepsi and Coke actually lit up different parts of the brain. While Pepsi hit the flavor centers, Coke lit up regions of higher thinking. That makes Pepsi the winner in terms of flavor, but in terms of brand awareness, it's Coke all the way. There's something else at work here too. Over the course of a full beverage, like a full can of Coke or Pepsi, our tastes adjust slightly and a less sweet flavor will hit the spot. It's the same phenomenon at play in the wine world. And in a quick sip, sweeter does better. Everyone knows we're not good at just taking a few sips of something. And that's likely a reason Coke has remained a practical favorite over the sweeter Pepsi, in spite of naysaying taste tests. The secret is out. Maybe. The flavor combination used for the original Coca-Cola Classic formula is one of the most tightly guarded secrets in the universe. Dr. John Pemberton developed the unique flavor Coke calls Merchandise 7X, and legend says half is known by one person, the other half by someone else, and the two will never travel together to guarantee the flavor can live on forever.
For more than 100 years, the people who make Coca-Cola have guarded their super secret formula.
Only 2 guys in the world know it.
Of course, that's impractical bunk, but the 7X secret is still a mystery. Or it was. Maybe. In 1979, a photo accompanying an Atlanta Journal-Constitution story on Coke hid a tiny detail. Perhaps the 7X formula in the hand of Pemberton himself. So what's the formula? 8 ounces of alcohol, 20 drops of orange oil, 30 drops of lemon oil, 10 drops of nutmeg oil, 5 drops of coriander, 10 drops of neroli, and 10 drops of cinnamon. Coke naturally laughed it off and the general public moved on. Scientists tried to recreate it and it was close, but something was off. But how far off? It's entirely possible that's just a list of the original ingredients and they changed a bit over the years, but we may never know. There is alcohol in Coke. The 7X formula does seem to confirm one previously unknown and sort of strange ingredient: alcohol. Odd, but not everyone was entirely surprised. In 2012, French scientists found trace amounts of alcohol in Coke, and that had the potential to be a big problem for some people, particularly those who completely and absolutely abstain from alcohol, especially for religious reasons. Islam forbids alcohol, but Coke insists it is naturally occurring. Since they don't add alcohol to their soda, the argument goes, the soda is in acceptance with Islamic law and suitable for consumption, but it's not halal. It's also worth noting that the alleged 7X combination only uses a few ounces for gallons of syrup, so the trace amounts would be, well, pretty trace. The super exclusive international flavors. Even the Coca-Cola Freestyle machine, with its dizzying array of potential flavor combinations, doesn't feature every flavor Coke has to offer, as some flavors are available exclusively in certain countries. In India, Coca-Cola owns a soda called Thumbs Up, and it's mostly like Coke in other countries, but with a spicy kick. Head to Belgium and parts of France and you'll find the blood orange flavored Coca-Cola Light Sango, and Coca-Cola Citra is a citrus cola available in Japan and Mexico. Across Central and Southern Africa, they're huge fans of Sparletta, a sort of cream soda. Sounds odd? It's all down to what you're familiar with.
Whoppers stand virtually alone in the crowded candy world as one of the few to use malted milk as its main ingredient. Curious about this candy classic? Here's the untold truth of Whoppers. Major candy bars are some of the most heavily marketed and thus blatantly branded food products in the world. For example, most people know the Crunch Bar as Nestle Crunch, or that Hershey's signature candy is its solid chocolate Hershey bar. However, the connection between Whoppers and the identity of the candy company that produces them is complicated and has changed a lot over the years. The product we now know as Whoppers, little spheres of solid malted milk enrobed in chocolate, first became available in 1939 when they were produced by the Overland Candy Company. Just 8 years later, Overland was absorbed in a merger with the Chicago Biscuit Company, Leaf Gum, and Leaf Machinery, forming a new company called Leaf Brands, which produced Whoppers. W.R. Grace bought the production rights to all of Leaf's candy lines, including Whoppers in the 1960s, but then the rights reverted back to Leaf in 1976. Hershey Foods bought Leaf North America in 1996, bringing Whoppers under the famous Hershey's banner along with Milk Duds, Heath, and Payday. Whoppers have been virtually the same product, stretching back to their introduction in 1939. What's changed are the method in which they're sold and their name. The chocolate-covered malted milk balls were originally offered loose and unwrapped for the low price of 2 for 1 cent. At the time, they were on the larger side of bite-sized candies, and thus, the Overland Candy Company called them giants. After a few years, when automatic cellophane wrapping machines became inexpensive and efficient enough for industrial use, the candy became available in plastic tubes of 5 and known as five-somes. Likely a play on how manufacturer Leaf also made the candy sixlets, which were sold in cellophane packs of 6 pieces. Leaf would also introduce a line of M&M-sized malted milk balls called Maltettes. So it makes sense why, in the late 1940s, they changed the name of their larger chocolate malt balls to Whoppers. Many major American holidays have a certain class of candy associated with the day's festivities. Halloween has its fun-sized bars, Valentine's Day candy is all about heart-shaped boxes of bonbons, and Easter means the arrival of Peeps, Cadbury cream eggs, and Robin's eggs, speckled, pastel-colored, bite-sized eggs made of a sweet candy shell, chocolate, and malted milk. Those eggs are actually a variation of Whoppers, the industry leader in chocolate-covered malted milk balls, and the idea to manufacture them was hatched sometime in the late 1940s or early 1950s. According to Delish, the original Robin's eggs were a bit larger than they are presently, and they didn't come with that pastel coating. By the mid-1950s, Robin's eggs had taken on their familiar colors and size. Seasonal demand is so high for Robin's eggs that Hershey starts making them 5 months before Easter, laying 11 million pounds of eggs in that time, a rate of about 2 million individual candy eggs each hour. And unlike most other mass-produced chocolates, Robin's eggs aren't made with pour-in molds, but a vacuum-based process that stretches the candy into its oblong form. In the end, and out of all those millions upon millions of Robin's eggs, no two have the exact same speckle pattern. It seems like any time a candy takes hold in the collective culture and palate, it's not long before its manufacturer rolls out some spin-offs or brand extensions. For example, Twix begat Triple Chocolate and Peanut Butter Twix, and Snickers Hazelnut added a new nut to the mix. With the exception of the annual rollout of Robin's eggs, Whoppers does not rank among those successfully replicated candy brands, perhaps because the distinctive yeasty taste and grainy texture of its showcase ingredient, malted milk, doesn't pair well with things besides, or in addition to, chocolate. Among the Whoppers varieties that failed to take hold, in the mid-2000s, Whoppers Milkshake Strawberry hit shelves, with a white strawberry ice cream suggesting covering over the malted milk instead of chocolate, as did Whoppers Reese's Peanut Butter Flavored Candy. Made special for the Easter season in 2009, 3 other Whoppers milkshake flavors came and went: vanilla, blueberry, and orange cream. Around this time, Whoppers also made a cameo appearance in a Hershey's line called Twosomes, which consisted of a regular Hershey bar studded with tiny Whoppers candies. Hershey's is hoping their luck will change with the upcoming holiday release of Whoppers Snowballs. Franklin Mars of Mars Inc., the company that makes M&Ms and Snickers, didn't want to take his company international. But his son Forrest Mars did, so the younger man went to Europe in the 1930s to pursue his fortunes. He started his own candy company in England, according to The Guardian, and among his products was a bite-sized, chocolate-covered malted milk ball sold by the bag called Maltesers. Maltesers arrived in stores in the UK in 1937, 2 years before the Overland Candy Company started making chocolate-covered malted milk balls called Giants, later to be rebranded as Whoppers. Maltesers grew to become one of the UK's most popular candies, and they can be found as an import item in specialty stores in the United States. However, in the US, Whoppers producer Hershey's actually owns the American trademark on the word Malteser, according to Confectionery News, and puts out a similar malted milk ball product. In 2017, however, actual Maltesers became available in the US for the first time. It's disappointing when your box or bag of snacks isn't as full as you'd like. According to Consumerist, that empty space is called slack fill, and sometimes it has a practical purpose, like how the air in a potato chip bag prevents breakage during transport. But according to Robert Bratton, who filed a legal complaint against Hershey's in 2017, the empty space in boxes of Whoppers and Reese's Pieces went way beyond slack fill and constituted a kind of fraud. According to Bratton, the Whoppers box consisted of 41% air, which wasn't necessary to protect the candy because it came packaged in a plastic bag inside of the cardboard. In a statement in response to the suit, Hershey's said, "It is not possible to view the product packaging without also seeing the net weight and quantity disclosures." A federal judge allowed the case to move forward, but in May 2018, according to Legal Newsline, U.S. District Judge Nanette K. Lockery dismissed it, in part because Bratton just kept on buying Whoppers. Judge Lockery said in her ruling, Mr. Bratton has admitted that, since well before the class period, he has been aware of approximately how much candy and how much empty space was in each box of Whoppers and Reese's Pieces, and that he nonetheless continued to purchase the boxes. Hard to argue with that.
It's virtually impossible to eat just one. And that bright orange cheese powder all over your fingers, it's a dead giveaway that you were the one that polished off the bag. But as much as you love snacking on Cool Ranch, Cheese Supreme, or Blazin' Buffalo, there's probably a lot you don't know about your favorite chips. So dig deep and grab a handful. This is the untold truth of Doritos. Doritos addiction proven by science. You know that feeling you get when you're eating Doritos?
Hey, are you gonna finish those? Sorry, they're already gone. No, they're not. You left the best part. No, I'm pretty sure they're... cheese.
Business Insider broke down the facts from food scientist Dr. Stephen Witherley's book, Why Humans Like Junk Food, and found that it's the cheesy powder that's responsible for the chip's serious addictiveness. Not only is it high in sugar and salt, which our taste buds love, it also contains a trio of acids that cause a release of saliva and trigger the urge to eat. In other words, they're literally mouth-watering. Witherley says our brains love fat, and Doritos contain 50% fat calories, which happens to be the ideal ratio. And of course, there's the cheese, which when digested has an opioid-like effect on our systems. No wonder we're hooked. Brought to you by Disney?
Daddy, can you play Princess Fashion Shows with me?
Sweetheart, I'd love to, but the guys, they're outside waiting for me.
Doritos.
When it comes to the invention of Doritos, there are two competing theories. One story goes that they got their start at Disneyland. Another gives credit to Archibald West, a Frito-Lay marketing exec. But even Frito-Lay doesn't know the truth. PR director Joan Zatara told HuffPost, "We don't have anything in our records or archives that confirms it. We don't credit any one individual for inventing our products." As for the Disneyland version, once upon a time, Frontierland was home to Frito-Lay's Mexican joint, Casa de Fritos. One day, a salesman noticed the cooks were throwing out stale tortillas and recommended they fry them in oil for a crispy snack. They were a big hit with diners, and the iconic chip had unofficially been born. Eventually, West visited Casa de Fritos and tasted the Doritos. He immediately started production in 1964, and they went nationwide in '66. But there's another side to this story.
Did you find everything okay, sir? What?
Okay, so what about Arch West? This side of the story goes that in '64, while on a family vacation in Southern California, West happened upon a roadside shack selling greasy bags of toasted tortillas. He then pitched the idea of crisp triangular tortilla chips to his company.
Well, what do you think?
Whether or not Arch West actually invented Doritos, he was definitely loyal to the chips. According to his obituary, he ate them his whole life and was even sent new flavors to taste test long after retirement. When West died in 2011, his daughter told Dallas News, "We're tossing Doritos chips in before they put the dirt over the urn. He'll love it."
At least he got his dying wish.
A jumbo casket full of Doritos.
A ladylike controversy. Doritos found itself in hot water when Indra Nooyi, CEO of PepsiCo, Frito-Lay's parent company, made some surprising comments during a Freakonomics podcast. When asked about the differences in the way men and women eat chips, Nooyi responded,
"Watch a lot of the young guys eat the chips. They love their Doritos and they lick their fingers with great glee."
But she said of women,
they don't like to crunch too loudly in public. And, they don't lick their fingers generously.
And she only made things worse, saying,
"Are there snacks for women that can be designed and packaged differently? And how can you put it in your purse?"
This, of course, sent the internet into a tizzy, calling for Frito-Lay to rethink this sexist idea. PepsiCo quickly clarified. The reporting on a specific Doritos product for female consumers is inaccurate. We already have Doritos for women. They're called Doritos.
Billy, use the cleaner.
Oh. Touchdown.
Snacktivism. In 2015, Doritos partnered with the It Gets Better project to launch Pride Flag-inspired Doritos Rainbow, which supported LGBTQ youth. Ram Krishnan, Frito-Lay Chief Marketing Officer, explained, "Time and again, our consumers have shown us there really is nothing bolder than being true to yourself. With Doritos Rainbow's chips, we're bringing an entirely new product experience to our consumers to show our commitment toward equal rights for the LGBTQ community." Collabing with the Bell. A partnership with fast food titan Taco Bell, the Doritos Locos Taco was an immediate success. According to CEO Greg Creed, its launch in 2012 was the, quote, biggest in Taco Bell history, selling an astounding 500 million tacos in the first 14 months. That's more than 1 million tacos per day.
We had a feeling it was going to be big, but no one predicted this.
By 2013, they had hit $1 billion in sales.
They should make a cool ranch one.
Well, they better hurry up before I'm dead.
It's crazy to think that the collab with Frito-Lay almost didn't happen, but issues with taste and texture kept the taco in development for years. Taco Bell product developer Steven Gomez told Business Insider, "The idea sounds really simple, but it has to deliver on two fronts, the classic Taco Bell taste and the distinctive Doritos experience. Unlike a tortilla chip, taco shells can't break and have to properly hold the taco ingredients. They eventually got it right, make that very right, and the rest is delicious history."
What flavor are they gonna make next?
Action! I have no idea.
Wendy's has had its famous chili on the menu since the very first restaurant opened in 1969. Here's the story of why Dave Thomas wanted chili on the menu when he launched Wendy's. The full name of Wendy's is Wendy's Old-Fashioned Hamburgers. Wendy's famous burgers have propelled the company for more than 50 years and informed its menu, even in non-traditional fast food side items. According to the chain's website, the first restaurant opened for business on November 15, 1969, with just one outlet in Columbus, Ohio.
I started Wendy's with one restaurant and a philosophy. Don't have hamburgers sitting around. Serve them hot off the grill.
The initial menu was brief and extremely uncomplicated. Wendy sold burgers, fries, soft drinks, the Frosty, and in a wild-card play that immediately differentiated itself from other fast food outlets, chili. It cost just 55 cents, the same as a single patty hamburger did at the time. Over time, Wendy's grew into one of the biggest and most dominant hamburger chains on the planet, serving both classical and experimental takes on the beef, cheese, bun formula, along with plenty of other standard fast food items like fries, chicken sandwiches, chicken nuggets, and kids' meals. Even after more than 50 years on the scene, not too many other mainstream hamburger-oriented fast food outlets have ever bothered to take Wendy's lead and sell an original recipe chili. It's such an anomaly that in his book Dave's Way, Wendy's founder Dave Thomas admitted that people have often asked him why he chose to have chili on the Wendy's menu. His justification is viable both in 1969 and today. It was a way to cut down on food waste and turn a small profit off of meat that would ordinarily have gone into the trash. Fast food workers have to work, well, fast, and sometimes that means grilling up enough burgers to meet anticipated demand. But what happens to patties that get cooked but not sold or eaten? Some restaurants would just throw them away and suffer financial loss. Wendy's doesn't do that. It saves unsellable meat for its famous chili.
That's a heck of a good idea.
Even though Dave Thomas wanted hot chili on the Wendy's menu before he even opened his first store in 1969, he was briefly stymied on just how exactly he was going to pull it off. Thomas wrote in his memoir, Dave's Way, "The recipe was the hard part. The exact combination of beef, spices, vegetables, and multiple kinds of beans was struck upon only after what Thomas called, quote, marathon cooking sessions that took place in his own kitchen at home, led by his wife, Lorraine, and in the kitchen of Charlotte Emke, spouse of Len Emke, a car dealer and close friend of Thomas, who also helped secure the real estate to open the first Wendy's. Lorraine Thomas and Charlotte Emke developed and finalized the recipe for Wendy's chili that was sold in the first restaurant on the first day, and hasn't really changed all that much since." Wendy says its chili is chili, and upon a quick examination, it certainly seems like chili. It smells like onions and tomatoes, and is made with beef and tasty spices and flavorings after all. But some chili purists could argue that Wendy's chili is not technically that. It's full of vegetable chunks as well as beans. In Texas-style chili, vegetables are cooked and broken down or pureed until they're part of the whole reddish-brown mixture, while beans are generally not included at all. And all those ingredients float inside of a fairly thin broth, unlike the rich, thick gravy meets marinara texture of Texas chili. Wendy's chili, in other words, is a beef and bean soup. But whatever it is, Wendy's uses a not-so-secret recipe for its signature spoon and bowl hot and soft spicy mush. According to Secret Sauce, in 1994, Wendy's founder Dave Thomas contributed his recipe for old-fashioned chili to Colorado Cooks for Education, a charity cookbook sold to raise funds for Colorado schools. From the brain of Thomas himself, the key ingredients in Wendy's chili are ground beef, tomato juice, tomato puree, red kidney beans, small red beans, onion, celery, chili powder, cumin, garlic powder, salt, pepper, oregano, cayenne, and sugar. Countless diners swear by fast food value menus, which allow them to feed themselves and their families for just a couple of bucks a pop. As an added bonus, diners can build a meal from a wide array of cheaply priced small to medium entrees, sides, beverages, and treats. Burger King debuted its value menu in 1998, and McDonald's launched its first dollar menu in 2002, both almost a decade after Wendy's originated the concept. During a fast food price war, in which Burger King and McDonald's deeply cut the price of the Whopper and Big Mac respectively to 99 cents, Wendy's took a different approach by creating a whole menu with 99-cent items. And so, in 1989, Wendy's launched the Super Value Menu. The new menu promised the attractive idea of several popular Wendy's items that each cost $1 minus a penny. Among the first most attention-getting sides, Wendy's flagship Frosty and chili. A 2007 commercial for Wendy's chili featured the Violent Femmes' Blister in the Sun, probably the best-known song of the Milwaukee indie rock trio. It appeared on the group's self-titled 1983 debut album and has popped up in many movies and TV shows. Composed by Femmes frontman Gordon Gano, Blister in the Sun is an early college rock classic, and it's also a song about teenage sexual frustration, which are only two of the reasons why it's surprising that it ever appeared in a Wendy's chili ad. On Milwaukee columnist Andy Tarnoff discussed his bafflement, and Femmes bassist Brian Ritchie wrote in to explain the situation. Ritchie wrote, "Gordon Gano is the publisher of the song and Warner's is the record company. When they agreed to use it, there's nothing the rest of the band can do about it." Ritchie also had this to add, "When you see dubious, or in this case disgusting, uses of our music, you can thank the greed, insensitivity, and poor taste of Gordon Gano. It is his karma that he lost his songwriting ability many years ago, probably due to his own lack of self-respect." According to Billboard, Ritchie sued Gano, seeking proper recognition as co-writer of several Violent Femmes songs, while also calling out his bandmate for sullying the group's good name by allowing its music to be used in ads. Most of us can look back on our childhoods and recall eating bowls full of the iconic blue box mac and cheese. Depending on who you ask, it's still the epitome of comfort food in adulthood. And the craving? It's real. There's just something about that bright yellow cheese sauce that soothes the soul. But did you know it's not the same as the stuff you used to love? Does that make a difference? Probably not, but it's still pretty fascinating to learn all sorts of trivia about this childhood favorite. It might even make you love it more, if that's even possible. Depression-era affordability. Kraft macaroni and cheese has been around since 1937, and that processed cheese was a game-changer during the Great Depression. The idea to box the pasta with the processed cheese as an easy dinner came about when a salesman started selling pasta with a packet of Kraft cheese attached with a rubber band. Inspired by that, Kraft began marketing the product as Kraft Dinner, with one box costing only pennies. Because of its affordability, long shelf life, and ability to feed a family of 4, the product flew off shelves and sold 8 million boxes in the first year. World War II kept the popularity of the product going. Due to food rationing during wartime, 2 boxes of Kraft Dinner could be purchased for 1 rationing coupon, and Kraft sold 80 million boxes in 1943.
This is incredible.
You like it? Oh my God.
That is such a relief because I worked so hard on it. I call it Mac's Famous Mac and Cheese.
The biggest fans in the world. Think you love this stuff? You might not have anything on the average Canadian, because they're way more serious about their boxed cheesy pasta than Americans. They eat so much of it that they've made Kraft Dinner the top-selling grocery item in their country, with each person eating an average of 3.2 boxes per year. That's an astounding 55% more than Americans eat, and it's such a big deal it even got a trendy new name and makeover in 2015. Now, Kraft Dinner is just KD. Canadians are also responsible for a good chunk of the worldwide mac and cheese consumption, eating 1.7 million of the 7 million boxes sold each week. They do love their KD.
Ooh, cheese. Ooh, cheese.
Is that your hair? Yeah, it's gone a bit wrong.
Is it toxic? A 2017 study of boxed mac and cheese had people swearing off one of their favorite comfort foods due to the presence of phthalates. But should we really worry? Phthalates are a group of chemicals that get into foods during the manufacturing process, and a small study found that 29 of 30 cheese products tested contain phthalates. Powdered cheeses contain about 4 times more than natural cheese, but even though certain phthalates have been banned in children's products since 2008, it's probably not as bad as it initially seemed. In response to the study, Kraft said in part, the safety of phthalates has been assessed by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and other authorities, such as the Centers for Disease Control. The trace levels found in the one limited test of mac and cheese are well below any level of concern. Hundreds of servings of mac and cheese would need to be consumed daily over an entire lifetime in order to exceed levels determined as safe. Enjoy away. Just maybe not 100 boxes a day. What's the white stuff? If you've ever made Kraft's microwavable Easy Mac, you might have noticed a white powder inside. It's not the cheese powder, so what is it? The package reads, "Note, you will see loose white powder in pasta. This is necessary for proper cooking." That just sort of makes it more mysterious. But Kraft says it's nothing more than modified food starch included to prevent the Easy Mac from boiling over in the microwave. It also acts as a thickening agent, but since it's commonly made from corn, wheat, potato, and tapioca, that's something to keep in mind if you have allergies. If you do, just stick with the stovetop stuff. Secret switcheroo. So, did you notice when they changed the recipe without telling anyone? In what Kraft called the world's largest blind taste test, it was revealed in March 2016 that the company had overhauled their original mac and cheese recipe to remove artificial flavors, preservatives, and dyes. But the change actually took place in December 2015. And by the time they let us all in on the secret, they'd sold more than 50 million boxes without anyone noticing. The recipe reformulation came in response to consumers' desire for simpler ingredients. That classic yellow color is no longer achieved with yellow 5 and yellow 6, but paprika, annatto, and turmeric. Well played, Kraft.
Word to your mother.
A 100-inch anniversary dessert, secret snacks in the mayor's office, and a battle royale with another iconic cookie. The history of Fig Newton is filled with plenty of delicious and colorful tidbits. Despite their shared surname, Fig Newtons weren't named after Isaac Newton. After all, when it comes to fruit, the famed physicist is more associated with apples than figs. The actual namesake of the cookie is the city of Newton, Massachusetts, which is about a 25-minute drive from downtown Boston. The company that developed Fig Newtons in the 1890s was known as the Kennedy Biscuit Works. The company's plant manager, James Hazen, had a tradition of naming new baked products after Boston's suburbs. So Fig Newtons could just as easily have been called Fig Wellesleys or Fig Brooklines. But thankfully that's not the case, as those alternate universe names just don't have the same ring to them.
Producing fig Newtons was never as simple as merging sweet dough with a jammy fig filling. In 1891, Kennedy Biscuit Company employee Henry Mitchell invented the cookie extrusion press. This machinery allowed two separate mixtures to be extruded around each other at the same time. In this case, the inner layer was fig paste and the outer layer was cookie dough.
It's essentially a funnel within a funnel.
Just as essential as the extrusion press was the fig Newtons recipe. Some claim that Philadelphia businessman Charles M. Roser was the one to invent and sell his fig roll recipe to the company. Others credit the recipe to Henry Mitchell. Either way, the fruit biscuit was patented by Mitchell in 1892. 7 years later, the Kennedy Biscuit Company was bought out by the New York Biscuit Company. And then in 1890, the New York Biscuit Company merged with the American Biscuit Company to create the National Biscuit Company. The National Biscuit Company then became Nabisco in 1941, and the cookie extrusion press and the original recipe tagged along through every merger. The city of Newton is understandably proud of the fig Newton, but this treat's origins can actually be traced back to Great Britain. And if you follow the path even farther back in time, you'll find the fig rolls that graced lavish medieval Arab tables where they were touted as delicious health foods. In the UK, fig rolls are sold in packages much like fig Newtons. The curved pastry edges on packaged fig rolls are strikingly similar to the American version, but the homemade version provides even more insight into how this pastry originated. Fig rolls were a popular home-cooked recipe in 19th century Britain, as it was hoped that the fibrous, fruity cookies would help with digestion issues. Despite this transatlantic origin story, all other versions of the treat besides the fig Newton must accept a generic fig bar label, as the name fig Newton is a Nabisco trademark. Figs have been a popular food around the world for centuries, but there were no figs in American commercial products when the jammy fruit dewdrop made its first commercial appearance in the fig Newton. Figs are far more complex than they let on. In fact, 1/2 cup of figs has the same amount of calcium as a 1/2 cup of milk. But there aren't a lot of people out there advocating for fig consumption. In the case of fig Newtons, Nabisco sources fig paste from valley fig growers. As reported by the Washington Post in 1989, the company's blend was customized, but most fig bar paste from valley fig growers consists of Black Mission, Calamurna, and Adriatic figs. Carla Gambeschia, the author of La Dolce Vita University, an unconventional guide to Italian culture from A to Z, has written about America's historical lack of interest in fresh figs. The fresh fig has lived in the fig Newton's shadow for over a century. But as Gambeschia points out, these fruits are gastronomical gems that can be used in a diverse array of sweet and savory dishes.
The fig is a very secretive fruit.
Fig Newtons are polarizing cookies. Their faithful fans can't get enough of them, while others dismiss them for their signature fig filling. A 2022 episode of the comedy podcast Taste Buds even showcased Fig Newtons in a hotly contested battle against fudge stripe cookies. But despite the controversy and bad blood, there was a time when Fig Newtons could claim a spot among the top of the snack heap. In fact, in 1991, they were the third most popular cookie produced by Nabisco and the third most popular in the United States, as the company could claim all three of the top spots. In 1992, Nabisco was still milking the energy from the 100th anniversary of Newtons the previous year, as they launched a fat-free version and a new marketing campaign. Fig Newtons fit well into the era's low-fat dieting trends and health-focused culture. So at the time, they were behind only two of America's other favorite cookies, Oreos and Chips Ahoy. Data about Fig Newton's place in 2022 isn't readily available, but the cookie's current owner, Mondelez International, was reportedly number one in the cookie market with $3.9 billion in U.S. sales in 2021. In the 1970s, Nabisco debuted a Fig Newton character that would change the face of the cookie forever. These ads were all the rage in the disco decade, with actor James Harder as the star. A Massachusetts native, Harder also appeared in TV shows and movies, but the big fig roll left behind a legacy for the ages. One 1975 ad entitled The Fig Newton Dance captures the character's happy-go-lucky attitude to a T. Harder is dressed like a fig, complete with curly elf shoes and a hat that mimics the narrow stem of a fresh fig. He bites into a cookie, eyes wide, and goes on to sing and dance under light beams. It might seem strange, or even a little gruesome for an ad to feature a fig engaging in cannibalism, but the ads still have their fans to this day. The comments section for the video on YouTube features people saying things like, "My childhood," and "This is weird as heck, and I love it." Evidently, this advertising strategy proved effective and still touches figgy hearts to this day.
Rich and gooey inside, tender golden outside. Yummy, yum.
The town of Newton, Massachusetts still clearly wears the Fig Newton badge of honor with pride and has for decades. When Theodore Mann was mayor from 1972 to 1994, he was known for passing out Fig Newtons over the course of his tenure. For him, the cookies were a source of local pride that gave the city an identity. As he told the Associated Press, you don't hear about Fig Philadelphias or Fig New Yorks. No, you hear about Fig Newtons. Mann shared his Fig Newton enthusiasm with all visitors to his office, giving the cookies away as gifts. As the town's director of cultural affairs told the AP, it seems he has an endless supply. And it seems this mayoral tradition of passing out Fig Newtons to visitors has continued. As recently as 2020, Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller was reportedly keeping a Fig Newton stash in her office for visitors to share in the town's cookie joy. Newton Town pride knew no bounds in 1991 when Fig Newtons turned 100 years old. A massive anniversary celebration with a price tag close to 6 figures was held in the town that year. The party included Fig Newton paraphernalia, a performance by Grammy-winning pop singer Juice Newton, and a Fig-themed art contest. Additionally, participants were fed a barbecue lunch, and California Fig Advisory Board representatives announced that 25 fig trees would be planted in the city. And the festivities didn't stop there. A live Big Fig character from the 1970s ads and a 100-inch Fig Newton cookie both made grand entrances during the celebration. At the same time, attendees feasted on unlimited cookies at City Hall. However, probably not all of Newton's residents joined in with the Figgy festivities. By 1991, the town was reportedly a wealthy community filled with high-powered professionals who may not have had the time to celebrate a humble cookie.
I don't have time for this today.
Massachusetts is a proud baking state. In addition to Fig Newtons, Boston cream pie, Parker House rolls, and Toll House chocolate chip cookies are all products of the Commonwealth. So when Governor William F. Weld found himself in the middle of a cookie conundrum in 1997, all eyes were on what decision he was going to make. Would he sign or veto a bill to make Toll House cookies the official state cookie? As it turned out, a third-grade class from Somerset, Massachusetts proposed the bill, thereby putting Fig Newton's place in history squarely on the line. In April, Weld spoke to the media and said, "You got to stick with Fig Newtons. Everybody I knew grew up with Fig Newtons. They're delicious." But a few months later, the town of Whitman, the city where the Toll House restaurant created the now legendary Toll House cookie, found itself pitted against Newton. Toll House ultimately won out on July 9, 1997. It's hard for any sweet treat to win a head-to-head battle against the beloved chocolate chip cookie. Still, Fig Newtons will live on in the hearts of the faithful in Massachusetts and beyond for years to come. 90s kids surely remember Fig Newton's yellow box and cookie-filled sleeves all too well. But as 90s kids grew into 21st century adults, Fig Newtons also grew up and got a significant facelift along the way. In 2012, Nabisco dropped the Fig from the name, leaving a simplified Newton cookie on grocery store shelves. Why the drastic change? Nabisco had long produced other fruit Newtons, including strawberry, raspberry, blueberry, and cinnamon apple varieties. Furthermore, 21st century consumers reportedly didn't think figs were cool or hip, associating the fruit more with fiber content than with deliciousness. Before the relaunch, sales were declining, so Nabisco dropped the Fig and adopted the more generic Newton name. Afterwards, sales picked up, mainly due to Newton Fruit Thins, serving as validation that this was a wise decision to prosper in the new millennium. The Fig Newton's British cousin had quite a moment in the spotlight when Paul Hollywood put the humble fig roll on TV screens worldwide for an episode of The Great British Bake Off, also known as The Great British Baking Show. The bakers took to creaming butter and sugar for the soft biscuit dough and simmering figs in a sugar syrup before blending them into a paste. Then, without any extrusion press in sight, they had to roll the dough into a long log, pipe the fig paste filling down the middle, and roll it up to seal in the paste. When asked why he chose fig rolls for the Biscuit Week challenge, Hollywood revealed that they were one of his dad's favorite biscuits. So it seems that fig rolls and Fig Newtons have yet another thing in common. They're both sources of nostalgic cookie memories.
I remember growing up with my dad eating these, watching the wrestling on a Saturday afternoon.
How many could he eat?
He'd probably go through a packet.
Well, roll on fig rolls.
Before we conclude, we have to tackle an age-old debate. Are Fig Newtons cookies or are they cakes? At face value, they certainly seem to tick all the cookie boxes. They're small, handheld, and packed in parallel sleeves. However, there was a time when they were presented as a cake. Fig Newton ads in the 80s even featured the slogan,
"A cookie is just a cookie, but Newtons are fruit and cake."
In fact, Fig Newtons were known as cakes from the moment they were born up until the 80s. A vintage 1929 box even reads Fig Newtons, fig cake in its finest form. A few decades later, though, the marketing changed, and Nabisco now referred to the product as a chewy cookie. In the UK, the figgy snack debate also runs rampant. After the Great British Bake Off aired its Fig Roll Technical Challenge during Biscuit Week, viewers took to social media to share their thoughts. One fan tweeted, "It's in the biscuit aisle in British supermarket chain Asda. I rest my case." Another struck back, citing Wikipedia's classification of the treat as a cake. Olive magazine editor Laura Rowe quieted the mayhem as she declared, "The fig roll is definitely a biscuit. It has a firm bite to it, more like pastry if we're being pedantic."
San Marzanos are among the most tantalizingly tasty tomatoes you could enjoy. But what makes them so special? Where do they come from? And do you know how to spot a fraudulent fruit posing as the real deal? Stick around to find out. Food traditions are taken very seriously in Europe. If a certain regional specialty is popular enough, a specific way to make it can become enshrined in law. Most countries have systems of governance over who has the right to refer to their product names. A prime example is wine, as experts agree that the geographic location influences the finished product. Like how true champagne can only be produced in the Champagne region of France, the same product produced elsewhere must be referred to as sparkling wine. A similar distinction is made with food products and their place of origin in Italy as well. Parmigiano Reggiano is a popular example, and of course, San Marzano tomatoes are another noteworthy product. San Marzano refers to the region in southern Italy where the tomatoes are grown, as well as to the specific tomato variety. The standard for these tomatoes is intentionally set very high and specifies that they must be grown in the right place and harvested at a certain size. These restrictions are imposed to prevent inferior products from being labeled with a famous name. When paying a premium price, it just makes sense to be absolutely certain that you're getting the genuine article and not the work of a fraudster. The region of San Marzano is located in southern Italy, an area that is hotter and more arid than the northern parts of the country. It turns out these hotter temperatures are perfect growing conditions for tomatoes, as they can't thrive in the north's gentler, more temperate climate. This is why tomatoes and red sauce are associated with Italian food for many Americans. The vast majority of Italian immigrants were escaping poor conditions in southern Italy when they crossed the Atlantic. The tomatoes come from a little sliver of land between the cities of Naples and Salerno. Naples, known for its world-famous pizza, is one of the biggest cities in Italy, even if it's not well regarded as a tourist destination. Salerno, meanwhile, is known for the quality of its citrus fruits. The nearby Amalfi Coast has been famous for its lemons for centuries. Although the region lacks in infrastructure and investment compared to its northern neighbors, there is no lack of sophisticated and delicious culinary traditions. These traditions are emblematic of what makes Italian food so good. Simple, high-quality products treated in just the right way in order to bring out their best qualities. Pompeii was a prosperous town that was wiped out in 79 AD by the active volcano known as Mount Vesuvius. The ruins of the ancient city now stand as one of the most well-preserved examples of classical Roman daily life. The fact that it was buried under ash and lava prevented further decomposition and had a number of other impacts. Volcanic ash has many benefits to offer growing crops. Not only is it rich in nutrients that are depleted in soil from regular use, but it is also a carbon sink that can actively pull carbon from the air. Although it can be synthetically reproduced, the best and most sustainable sources are actual volcanoes. The local people living around Mount Vesuvius recognize this potential, and they grow their precious, government-regulated tomatoes on its slopes. This is because the volcanic soil makes for a sweeter and less acidic tomato, and those qualities make them especially nice for cooking. The volcanic soil, which is rich in phosphorus and potassium, enhances these tomatoes by coaxing out a depth of flavor that most other varieties struggle to achieve. Anyone who has cooked a batch of tomato sauce can attest that dealing with the plentiful seeds packed into each tomato can be a real pain. Although the seeds are perfectly edible, they can ruin the texture of a finished product, as well as trigger acid reflux in those prone to it. Italians are partial to buying tomato passata, which is the Italian word for what?
Tomato sauce?
Not quite, but close. It literally translates to strained tomatoes. They are exactly what they sound like: uncooked, strained tomato puree. This eliminates the skin and the seeds, removing any distracting textures. While there are plenty of tips for peeling tomatoes and getting rid of the seeds, a better option is to pick a variety that is already low in seed content. San Marzano's tendency to produce fruit that is mostly flesh with relatively few seeds is one of the features that has made it so popular with many cooks. The liquid surrounding the seeds can water down a pot of sauce or a tomato stew. Therefore, when you're dealing with a tomato that has a higher proportion of flesh versus seeds, you'll be able to cook it for less time, which means it will maintain a fresher flavor. As the venerable culinary school Le Cordon Bleu teaches its students, good cooking comes down to balance. Specifically, it entails weighing all of the fundamental tastes against each other: salty, sweet, bitter, sour, and umami. This means that altering one ingredient, or mistreating it, can throw off an entire dish. In seeking a balance between flavors, cooks must often choose one ingredient over another option. San Marzano tomatoes happen to be a tomato variety with a lower acidity or sourness than most. This is considered a benefit, since a tomato sauce that is too sharp will require a lot of sugar to create balance. A low-acid tomato like San Marzano is also better for people who suffer from acid reflux or heartburn, which can be aggravated by highly acidic food. This tomato's minimally sour profile means that its sweet, natural flavors are able to shine through. It is a fruit after all, even if the US Supreme Court doesn't agree. Naples is a very old city, and many of its traditions, and those of the surrounding region, go back centuries, if not millennia. However, pizza is a much more recent novelty. One story suggests that in the late 1800s, Queen Margherita was served a dish of flatbread topped with tomatoes, mozzarella cheese, and basil. The combination of colors resembled the tricolor flag of Italy, and a beloved tradition was born. Tomatoes are native to South America and were discovered by European explorers when they made the trip over to the New World. When tomatoes were first brought back to Europe, they were thought to be poisonous due to their close resemblance to the deadly nightshade plant. This kept people from realizing the potential of the tomato for centuries. However, once people discovered that it wasn't poisonous but actually quite tasty, it became inseparable from certain national cuisines. Today, it would be hard to picture Italian food without any tomatoes at all.
As a pizza lover, I only ever buy cans of San Marzano tomatoes.
In pursuit of safeguarding what makes Neapolitan pizza so special, the Italian government has issued guidelines that cooks must follow. One of these states that only San Marzano variety tomatoes can be used in the sauce. This use of local, regional specialties is living proof of a well-known foodie adage: if it grows together, it goes together. Although it may seem counterintuitive, many cooks prefer to use canned tomatoes over fresh ones. For one, the tomato season in the US is relatively short, only about 3 to 4 months, which means that high-quality fresh tomatoes are unavailable for most of the year. This makes canned options a reliable choice for the time outside of peak tomato season. There are also some difficulties that come with shipping fresh tomatoes. Most tomatoes sold in American grocery stores are picked when they are severely underripe, as a ripe tomato is a juicy, fragile disaster waiting to happen. Instead of shipping delicate ripe tomatoes all over the world, most growers pick hard fruit. Once the tomatoes arrive at their destination, ethylene gas is typically applied, causing them to soften and turn red. While it may save tomato growers the headache of figuring out how to ship their crops, it leaves supermarket shoppers without many flavorful options, except those that come in cans. Since the can is sturdy and the products within are picked at the peak of freshness, canned tomatoes are at the ideal level of ripeness. In Italy, it's only a matter of hours between harvest and canning, which makes all the difference in flavor and consistency. Italy takes its food culture very seriously, with strict regulations about what is allowed to be served to the public. The New York Times details many differences in food safety laws between the US and Europe. The biggest takeaway is that Europeans are much less tolerant of chemical food additives than Americans. The American Food and Drug Administration relies on companies to police their own additives, an approach that doesn't fly in Europe. One noteworthy additive is calcium chloride, which the FDA labels as generally recognized as safe, noting that it helps prevent browning in processed fruits and vegetables. The additive is incorporated into canned goods, including tomatoes, so that they arrive in your kitchen intact. Diced tomatoes are almost always treated with calcium chloride so that you don't end up with a can of tomato puree instead of distinct chunks. In Italy, producers do not use this additive, choosing to keep things natural instead. This means the tomatoes arrive soft and ready to break down further, which is exactly what you want if you are making a sauce. Nonetheless, the consistency is worth keeping in mind when you are buying these premium tomatoes for a recipe. Considering that a can of San Marzano tomatoes can cost several times more than a generic option of the same size, it does raise the question, are they worth it?
Activating shrug mode.
There's no obvious answer, since one cook may be happy to spend the extra money on a product they know is a genuine, artisanally produced item. But another cook may be just as happy to go with whatever's on sale. There is a rigorous and costly process that must be adhered to in order to net the Italian government's approval. Growers must recoup their investment in the approval process, and they inevitably pass that higher cost on to the consumer. There may be little more than smoke and mirrors to the higher price tag, however. Food and Wine details a phenomenon where people will rate a wine higher when they know that it's particularly expensive. It could be that the same trick holds true with San Marzano tomatoes, and any perceived increase in quality is all in the buyer's mind. Unfortunately, as with many nice products, dishonest people have tainted San Marzano tomatoes. If you're not careful, you could end up buying a standard tomato at a premium price. Indeed, 95% of tomatoes labeled as San Marzano in American stores are not authentic. To be absolutely certain that you are getting genuine San Marzanos, you should check for a DOP label from the Italian government and look for an official certification number on the bottom of the can. Another surefire way to spot a fake is to make sure the tomatoes are whole. Any diced or pureed products cannot be called San Marzanos by Italian law. Many product reviews show that Americans consistently pick domestic tomatoes over pricier San Marzanos. However, this could be chalked up to the lack of availability of the real deal, and perhaps a deliberate counterfeit, sneaking its way into the taste tests. One of the best ways to ensure access to the real deal is to grow your own tomatoes, and many seed catalogs sell the means to sprout San Marzanos. This is ideal for any ambitious gardener who wants to try their green thumb at growing the Cadillac of tomatoes. Just keep in mind that they require plenty of maintenance.
I'm a tomato and I need your help!
It can be hard to grow a plant from a seed in amateur conditions. Therefore, it's recommended to buy baby plants from a nursery and transplant them to a sunny, well-watered spot when they're ready. San Marzanos, like all tomato plants, prefer lots of direct sunlight. It is recommended that the plants receive up to 8 hours of uninterrupted sunshine, so it's no wonder they hail from the sunny south of Italy. The watering regimen is particularly important, since tomato plants suffer when soil moisture drops below a certain level. If the plant starts to wilt, it becomes much more susceptible to the dreaded blossom end rot. This unsightly blemish will ruin your tomato harvest, so be sure to keep the soil moist if you plan on experimenting. While the originals are grown at the foot of Mount Vesuvius in soil conditions that would be nearly impossible to recreate on your own, you can still take steps, such as including wood ash in the potting soil to replicate the nutritious, fortified soil of southern Italy.
We're currently in the throes of a full-force non-dairy milk revolution. If you're new to the non-dairy game, you may be hearing people ranting and raving over oat milk. But is it all too good to be true? Let's find out. This is the untold truth of oat milk. With its subtly sweet and creamy taste profile, oat milk's similarity to cow's milk is simply remarkable. It's a pretty ideal alternative for folks who are craving their dairy fix but want to cut back on cow's milk for health or environmental reasons.
So I had an oat milk latte recently to try this out, and it was solid.
If you're at all familiar with oat milk, you probably know one brand in particular, Oatly. It's become especially well known in America thanks in part to its offbeat approach to marketing. But here's a shocker for you. Oatly has actually been on the market for nearly 3 decades, according to Time. Rickard Usta, a researcher at Lund University in Sweden, began producing his own oat milk in the 90s while researching ways to produce milk alternatives for people with lactose intolerance. He decided to use oats because they're a particularly abundant crop in Sweden. Once he'd gotten the process down to a T, Usta founded Oatly, selling the milk to a small but devoted crowd of milk-loving Swedes. But the company's oat milk never made its way across the pond until 2016, and it quickly took American markets by storm. In fact, Oregon-based Pacific Foods Company was the first oat milk producer to come onto the American scene back in 1996, but you can thank Oatly for creating the modern oat milk craze. Oat milk's rapid rise in popularity could spell bad news for another non-dairy milk, almond milk. When it was first introduced to mainstream markets, almond milk quickly knocked soy milk from its position as the plant-based milk on top. Almond milk has remained the most popular non-dairy milk in the game, with almond milk sales reaching more than $1 billion back in 2018, according to Nielsen.
It's my job to test the product.
However, almond milk brands could be in trouble. For starters, they've gotten a lot of flack recently for not being environmentally sustainable. Plus, the diversification of the non-dairy milk industry could present a potential threat to this nutty dairy alternative, particularly since some critics already think it's less satisfying than the new kids on the block. In fact, oat milk could be the vegan milk that ultimately dethrones almond milk. According to Bloomberg Businessweek, oat milk sales jumped from a mere $4.4 million in 2017 to $29 million in 2019. While that's a far cry from the $1 billion that almond milk reportedly made back in 2018, there's something worth noting. Most of the world's oats are used to produce animal feed, which means that the oat milk industry has plenty of room to expand. Liz Specht, the Associate Director of Science and Technology at the Good Food Institute, told The Guardian, "There's a huge existing acreage that we can safely steal share from without moving the needle at all on total production." Oatly's first forays into the U.S. market were wildly successful, so much so that the company struggled to keep up with America's newfound appetite for its plant-based milk. In December 2018, Fox News reported that Oatly has developed a cult following among hipsters, vegans, and lactose intolerants alike. And then the company ran into a bit of a problem. It was all out of oat milk because there simply wasn't enough supply for America's ravenous demands. At the time, most of Oatly's oat milk was produced in Europe and imported to the States. This slowed down the process of getting cartons of Oatly out of the factories and into American grocery stores, not to mention the fact that the process of making oat milk can't be rushed. According to Delish, the company was working on building its first factory on American soil at the time of the shortage. The facility opened up in the spring of 2019, and the shortage ended thereafter. But in the meantime, Americans who absolutely needed their daily dose of oat milk took to Amazon, where vendors were listing cartons for upwards of $200. After the U.S. facility's opening, Americans have been pretty lucky. We haven't seen an oat milk shortage of that scale ever since. Oat milk brands use a lot of fancy scientific processes to make their oat milk as creamy as possible, but you can easily make an equally healthy version at home. All you need is some oats, water, a fine mesh strainer, and a high-speed blender. You'll want to pick up some high-quality rolled oats for this. Seriously, don't use Quaker instant oatmeal if you want a satisfying and creamy plant-based milk, despite what Wilford Brimley tells you.
New Quaker Extra. It's the right thing to do, and a new way to do it.
To create the oat milk of your dreams, simply soak the oats in water overnight and blend them until they're smooth and creamy. Oh, and here's a helpful hack for you. You can add sweeteners like maple syrup to really boost the flavor of your oat milk and make it resemble the store-bought version. After blending everything together, simply pour it through a strainer or cheesecloth to remove any sediment from your oat milk and enjoy this high-fiber and easy-to-make non-dairy milk. Your homemade oat milk might taste a little bit different when compared to the cartons you pick up at the grocery store. That's largely because oat milk companies process their milk with enzymes, oils, and other additives that give the product its characteristically creamy flavor. So if you're looking for an unprocessed and healthier alternative, making it at home is your best bet. Oat milk isn't necessarily the drink you should reach for when you need a protein blast. In fact, it contains significantly less protein than soy milk and pea milk. But when you add cow's milk into the equation, oat milk really can't compete. However, oat milk does contain more protein per serving than almond milk, coconut milk, and rice milk. According to BuzzFeed News, the average serving of cow's milk has about 8 grams of protein. On top of that, cow's milk also contains all 9 of the essential amino acids. While different oat milk brands have different protein counts, a 1-cup serving typically only contains about 3 grams of protein, and it doesn't contain a complete amino acid profile. Soy milk, on the other hand, is pretty much on par with cow's milk, at least as far as protein and amino acid counts go. The takeaway here? If you happen to be a vegan bodybuilder, it might be better to stay away from oat milk and get your protein somewhere else. As a general rule of thumb, you should expect oat milk to have slightly more calories than other non-dairy milks.
Not all milks are created equal.
As BuzzFeed reports, a serving of oat milk typically contains about 120 calories, 4 times the amount of calories in a serving of almond milk. That's actually not so bad when you compare oat milk to the average serving of whole cow's milk, which typically contains about 150 calories per serving. Skim milk, on the other hand, typically has around 90 calories per serving. If you're cutting out dairy because you want to cut down on your calorie intake, oat milk will only make a marginal difference. But if counting calories isn't a big deal for you, oat milk might just be the best plant-based milk for you. Still not sure why Oatly was so popular when it first hit US markets? Well, we recommend you march over to the nearest coffee house and order an oat milk latte. You'll quickly see what all the fuss is about. Steamed oat milk is pretty much second to none, at least as far as non-dairy milk and coffee pairings go. Baristas all over the country are becoming fanatical oat milk converts. That's because the milk's neutral flavor profile lends itself quite well to creamy espresso-based beverages like lattes and mochas. What's more, oat milk froths up really well when you steam it, creating the perfect microfoam for a non-dairy cappuccino, according to Refinery29. No wonder special barista blends for oat milk have been popping up in coffee shops across the country. These versions are specifically formulated so that baristas can easily foam them up without having to switch up their steaming technique too much, and customers clearly love it.
I always make jokes that it's like oat o'clock because it seems like it comes in waves.
It's no wonder oatmeal is such a popular breakfast item. Oats are incredibly rich in the dietary fiber that helps our metabolism get flowing in the morning. As Medical News Today reports, 1 cup of dry oats contains 7.5 grams of fiber. As a result, oat milk is also a good source of fiber. According to a report in the Journal of Food Science Technology, it contains 2 grams of dietary fiber per serving, whereas cow's milk contains none. Meanwhile, oats contain a type of fiber known as beta-glucan, which has been found to have several potential health benefits, according to Good Housekeeping. In 2017, researchers found that this fiber can potentially boost your immune system on top of lowering cholesterol levels. One thing to keep in mind, Good Housekeeping makes a point to mention that it's still too early to say if the beta-glucan added to oat milk during processing has all of the same effects as regularly eating oats. It's certainly no secret that dairy isn't environmentally sustainable. As The Guardian reports, more or less every non-dairy milk on the market is better for the environment than cow's milk. Producing dairy emits an unparalleled level of greenhouse gases and also takes up more land and water than most non-dairy milks. Then there's the unpleasant issue of cow manure.
Really tackling and addressing the way that dairies manage their manure would represent one of the most significant climate programs we have in the state.
Meanwhile, some non-dairy milks are better than others. Almond milk, for example, is a notoriously unsustainable non-dairy milk. About 80% of almonds are produced in drought-ridden California. Since it takes about 15 gallons of water to produce about 16 almonds, almond milk production has the potential to take a heavy toll on the state's environment, according to the UCSF Office of Sustainability. As far as environmentally friendly choices go, oat milk could be one of the most viable alternatives. According to The Guardian, oats are mostly grown in colder northern areas like Canada and Scandinavia, so growing large quantities of oats doesn't require the same levels of deforestation that many other crops do. Oat milk is a bit of an anomaly when compared to almond and soy milk. This is due to the fact that oats are a grain. Almond milk and soy milk both have a similar nutritional profile since they're both derived from protein-rich fatty nuts and legumes. Meanwhile, oat milk is rather high in carbohydrates, according to BuzzFeed. The average serving of unsweetened oat milk contains around 16 grams of carbohydrates. Soy milk can have anywhere from 3 to 15 grams per serving, depending on the brand and whether or not it's sweetened, and cow's milk usually has 11 to 13 grams. Although oats are naturally gluten-free, things get a little dicier when you explore how oats are processed. As The Kitchen reported in 2011, oats are frequently processed in the same facilities as barley and wheat, both of which do contain gluten. As a result, oats are often contaminated with small traces of gluten even if they don't contain gluten themselves. As with many other non-dairy milks, it's important for gluten-sensitive individuals to check whether the brand and flavor of oat milk they're purchasing is certified as gluten-free. If you're in the U.S., you're in luck. Several oat milks available in the U.S. are in fact gluten-free or have gluten-free options. Just make sure to read the label before you start gulping. As you've no doubt heard, many oat farms have been known to treat their crops with the weed-killing compound glyphosate, a fact that has left many consumers concerned.
I like a little bit more transparency on knowing what's in my food.
What's all the fuss about? Well, according to U.S. News, the World Health Organization announced in 2015 that glyphosate is probably carcinogenic to humans. Well, for the record, Oatly has stated that they do not use oats treated with the weed killer, so it's probably safest to stick to their milk if you're at all concerned about the effects of glyphosate.
Tater Tots have become downright iconic. Yet how much do we really know about these tasty, crispy potato treats? They make appearances in diners, at parties, and occasionally in blockbuster movies. And how they were invented might surprise you. Here's the untold truth of Tater Tots. In 2017, Eater took a deep dive investigative journey into the history of Tater Tots. It all began with F. Nephi Grigg and his brother, Golden Grigg, two determined young Mormon entrepreneurs who each owned a potato farm, selling the bounty of their land to friends and neighbors. Prior to his death in 1995, Nephi wrote his own unpublished History of the Tot. Nephi was a visionary who believed frozen foods would soon dominate America's food industry. Following his hunch, the brothers mortgaged their farms and purchased a flash freezing plant in nearby Oregon, with a plan to transform their potato crop into frozen French fries. After some trial and error, they were able to rework the potato cutting machinery to separate the fries from the leftover slivers, which were used as cattle feed. An entrepreneur who hated waste, Nephi cooked up the idea of compacting those unwanted potato scraps into bite-sized nuggets that could be fried or baked.
Are you gonna eat your tots? No. Can I have them?
Naming their company after the two states in which they operated, Oregon and Idaho, Ore-Ida Foods Inc. was born. Tater Tots made their grand debut in 1954 at the National Potato Convention at Miami's fancy Fontainebleau Hotel. Nephi had come up with a genius plan to launch Ore-Ida's new culinary creation in spectacular style. After tracking down the chef in the hotel's kitchen, the crafty entrepreneur bribed him to cook up 15 pounds of the potato-based invention he'd brought with him, and then serve the tots to convention attendees at breakfast. His hunch that the potato bites would make a major impression on the assembled potato industry bigwigs was a good one. It worked even better than he'd hoped, and laid the groundwork for all the future success that lay glimmering on the horizon. Ore-Ida's founders had perfected their product, invented as a way to prevent unnecessary waste in production of their flash-frozen French fries. According to Nephi's notes, which said, "An unnamed salesman traveled the markets playing a ukulele and demonstrating our product, and was armed only with a thesaurus and an affinity for alliteration." However, there's another origin story circulating about how the Griggs potato scrap side dish came to be called Tater Tots. The company created a contest, inviting folks from all over America to submit their ideas. In this version of the story, the winning entry came from housewife Clora Leigh Orton, combining the word tater, which is slang for potato, and tot, a word describing an infant, basically baby potatoes. To capitalize on that brief window before the market would be flooded with imitators, the name Tater Tot was trademarked, new machinery purchased, and production ramped up to mass-produce their new food item. Tater Tots became a hot thing. They quickly took off, carving out an entirely new market share that hadn't existed before. As is usually the case when a new product becomes an established hit with consumers,
Other companies began producing their own version of tater tots under different names. However, even when consumers came to buy the knockoffs, they still referred to the imitators as tater tots, similar to how brands such as Band-Aids, Kleenex, and Corn Flakes came to become generic terms for both the original product and its imitation versions. As the New York Times reported in 2014, Ore-Ida struck back with its Imitators advertising campaign. In one of the commercials, tater tot-like products are seen wearing various disguises in hopes of tricking consumers, ranging from a Groucho Marx nose glasses mustache combo to a pirate outfit. Federico Ariola, vice president of the Consumer Products Brand Business Unit at Heinz, owner of the Ore-Ida brand, said, "The Imitators campaign was very successful." The campaign, Ariola added, was effective at reminding consumers that, quote, "the original is the only one." DIY Tots. In addition to imitation tater tots, the product has also been hit by competition from home cooks who've concocted their own recipes. Creating DIY tater tots, however, is not as easy as it might appear. Making the bite-sized potato nuggets without all that specialized machinery is actually quite an undertaking. David Kinch, chef at acclaimed California restaurant Manresa, has shared his special recipe for DIY tater tots. Anyone who attempts to tackle it, however, will probably want to take the day off, given that the recipe takes a whopping 12 hours to make. As Wes Rowe, chef and owner of San Francisco's Westburger and More, told Eater, they had made their own homemade tater tots in the past, but decided to stop doing that and instead serve customers OG Ore-Ida tots. Rowe said, "After all the time and labor, we all agreed we just love our classic Ore-Ida tots the most." One unfortunate side effect of the production process that creates tater tots is when starch-heavy foods are heated at high temperatures, it creates a chemical called acrylamide. But it wasn't until 2002 that its presence was detected in food. This presented a big problem, given that the state of California was already listing acrylamide as one of the carcinogenic substances listed within Proposition 65. That legislation, passed in 1984, required that consumers be given warnings about any cancer-causing substances they may come into contact with, which included the presence of acrylamide in tater tots.
Bottom line, acrylamide is not a new problem. More than likely, it has been around in some form or amount since we began to cook.
As the result of a lawsuit launched by the state of California against Ore-Ida and other manufacturers of potato products, Ore-Ida agreed to a settlement that involved paying $600,000 in costs and penalties, in addition to cutting acrylamide levels in the company's French fries and tater tots in half. Folks who love tater tots have unleashed their creativity on clever and occasionally bonkers recipes that take the bite-sized spud snacks in some bold new culinary directions. For example, Brit & Co. compiled a roster of 17 unique hacks that use tater tots as the basis of everything from waffles to a bacon cheeseburger tater tot casserole. Other hacks include appetizers such as bacon-wrapped tater tot bombs, buffalo chicken tater tot nachos, and even a tater tot breakfast pizza. For a meat-free tater tot hack, adventurous home cooks can try out this recipe for a tater tot burger, which uses tater tots to create a meatless vegetarian patty designed to satisfy even the most ardent meat eater. In addition, tater tots are also becoming popular to hack at Hanukkah, with recipes available online demonstrating how to use tater tots to create easy-to-make latkes. And the Mythical Kitchen offers a cheese, bacon, and sour cream tater tot bowl. Anyone who's been following the cooking instructions on the packaging of tater tots has been doing themselves a major disservice. Or at least, that's the opinion of the Kitchen's Kelly Foster, who wrote in 2018 that cooking those little potato nuggets using the recommended time on the package may heat them enough to render them edible, but she said that's hardly enough for them to reach their full, crispy-crusted, creamy center potential. Foster recommends putting your stopwatch away and instead looking at visual cues to determine when a batch of tater tots has reached nirvana-like perfection. She added, "You'll know the tots are done and ready when they have a deep golden brown color with an outer crust that looks exceptionally crispy." According to Foster, the brand's recommended cooking time, 25 to 35 minutes, simply isn't long enough to achieve that tater tot ideal. Instead, she recommends a solid 60 minutes in the oven. As Foster pointed out, that additional cooking time makes the most delicious difference in both the taste and texture of tater tots, by causing them to, quote, shrink and dry out a little. Foster concluded, and that makes them even crispier all around on the outside with a potatoey center that's more dense and creamy. For a brief and glorious 6-week period in the spring of 2018, Vancouver sports bar Jager's created an all-tater tots menu. The ultimate goal was an attempt to make all of the bar's patrons' wildest potato-fueled dreams come true. Jager's specialty menu items included tot esquites, cheesy tots, and tot poutine. For the latter, tater tots were substituted for French fries in the quintessentially Quebecois specialty known as poutine, in which crispy fries, or in this case, tater tots, are topped with hunks of cheese curds and drenched in savory gravy. There are indeed many ways to hack tater tots, using the crispy potato snacks as the basis for entirely new and unforeseen culinary delights. In that vein, fans of tater tots should pay tribute to Jim Parker, a former Portland journalist who was at the forefront of the Pacific Northwest city's pioneering craft beer movement. In an obituary of Parker, who passed away in 2019, the Oregonian highlighted another of his achievements: tachos. What are tachos? Exactly what you think. Nachos, but with tater tots substituted for corn chips, topped with black olives, melted cheese, jalapenos, sour cream, and other toppings traditionally associated with nachos. The tater tot-based meal became a staple of Parker's Oaks Bottom Public House in Portland. Parker said of his invention in 2015, "They looked at me like I was growing a third ear. They said, 'That sounds like stoner food.' They were humoring me to put them on the menu, but it ended up being one of our most ordered items." Tater tots are more than just a delicious snack. In fact, the bite-sized potato gems have also become part of pop culture. This became evident in the 2018 film Venom, based on the Marvel Comics character.
Food. Who said that?
As played by actor Tom Hardy, Eddie Brock is a maverick journalist who becomes paired with an alien symbiote to become the titular Venom, a massive, monstrous beast with a seemingly insatiable appetite, which Hardy attempts to satiate in a memorable scene by pouring an entire bag of still-frozen tater tots down his gullet. In an interview with Sci-Fi Wire, director Ruben Fleischer explained the character's obsession with tater tots, which had nothing to do with product placement. He said, "There was no deal with Ore-Ida. It was just in the script originally. It was always kind of a funny thing that the writers came up with, that he loves tater tots. We actually had to pare it down a little bit. There was a scene that we shot that didn't make it in the film, where he's at the grocery store buying, and the Venom tendrils come out and grab a bunch of tater tots."
Nowadays, milk can come from almost anywhere. Coconut milk, for one, is quickly rising in popularity, and that's no surprise. It can be a rich addition to soups, coffee, and smoothies, and it can also be enjoyed on its own as a thirst quencher. Here's the untold truth of coconut milk. Coconut milk comes in multiple forms, and it's important to understand the different options available. When it comes to cooking, canned coconut milk is typically king. For many, it's a pantry staple, as it's shelf-stable and can be added to plenty of recipes. Canned coconut milk is a bit thicker than its box counterpart, and it's known for imparting hints of coconut flavor and creaminess to a dish. When you open the can, you may find that the milk has separated, with thick cream on the top. But don't worry, as adding it straight to a saucepan while cooking will bring the separation back together in its creamy form. As for boxed coconut milk, which is often found on shelves in a carton, it's typically used for quicker recipes. It's not as thick or creamy, but it makes a great alternative to dairy milk for cereal or smoothies, or even coffee if you just need a light addition. Its flavor isn't as strong as canned coconut milk since it doesn't normally have the thick cream you see in a can, and often it may have higher water content or other additives. A powdered form of coconut milk is also available and can be mixed with water, but it's not as common at the grocery store as the canned or boxed options. If you visited the alternative milk section in the grocery store, you've likely noticed that the number of options is always increasing, and that's all due to demand. In 2018, sales of refrigerated plant-based milks jumped by 7% to $1.61 billion, making it very clear that people are craving other options besides your typical cow's milk. There are various reasons why milk alternatives are becoming more popular, such as people with lactose intolerance and other dietary concerns, as well as these products' versatility.
More plant-based products have appeared on the market, and they look pretty similar to milk too.
Coconut milk has been soaring right alongside the other options. In 2017, global sales topped $830 million. It makes sense that sales in Southeast Asian countries are so high, for example, as coconut milk is used in that region's cuisine so frequently. But the rest of the world is also pouring itself plenty of coconut milk, as North America accounted for 1/4 of that $830 million figure. And it doesn't look like this popularity is waning anytime soon, as sales of coconut milk are projected to have an annual growth rate of 7.3% from 2017 to 2027. Although the concept of coconut milk might seem fairly simple, the manufacturing process is a bit more complicated than you might think. The process begins by extracting the coconut meat or coconut kernel. Then the milky fluid found in the kernel is mechanically extracted from the matured coconut. Water is often added, but it can stand on its own as well. Actually making the coconut milk shelf-stable is where the real work comes in. Coconut milk has to be thermally processed before it can be packaged and make its way to a store near you. Once the coconut milk is extracted, it's heated to 92 to 95 degrees Celsius, with stabilizers added during the homogenization process. Once homogenized, it can be added to a can or box while it's still hot, or it can go through an exhauster to cool it down before entering the can. Without iron, our bodies wouldn't be able to function very well. The chemical element with atomic number 26 plays a huge role in the transportation of oxygen in the body. It's also generally pretty obvious when we're low on it, as it can cause headaches, dizziness, and body aches. Luckily, if you're a coconut milk aficionado, you may be getting a huge dose of iron every time you drink it, as 1 cup of raw canned coconut milk contains 7.46 milligrams of iron. While that may not sound like a ton, it actually is relative to the daily recommended amounts. According to Healthline, women ages 19 to 50 should be consuming at least 18 milligrams of iron per day. Meanwhile, men ages 19 to 99 need only 8 milligrams per day. Coconut milk is a great and tasty way to make a dent in that count. Just 1 cup covers more than a third of women's daily recommended amount and provides slightly more than the men's daily minimum. There are so many different reasons to enjoy coconut milk, and you might as well add its effect on the immune system to that list of benefits. Coconuts contain a long-chain fatty acid called lauric acid, which potentially makes coconut milk one of the most healthful foods you can consume. One study found that by pairing lauric acid and bacterial strains in a petri dish, many of the bacteria introduced didn't stand a chance. The lauric acid managed to inhibit the growth of bacteria known to cause pneumonia, tuberculosis, and other ailments pertaining to respiratory illness. It's also been found that lauric acid contributes to the death of cells in breast and endometrial cancer. Another health wonder of coconut is its ability to fight inflammation. When the body experiences inflammation, it's in response to things that might be causing it harm. When toxins enter the body or injuries occur, our bodies naturally want to heal. So antibodies are released and blood flow is increased to fuel that process. Along the way, the body may mistake things that it believes are causing it harm and fight against them, thus causing continuous inflammation.
Deep hurting. Deep hurting.
Adding coconut milk to your diet on a regular basis might just contribute to fighting that inflammation response. Studies have found that the extract and oils found in coconut milk have helped to reduce swelling in injured rats and mice, and it may just have the potential to do the same for humans. Sometimes names can be deceiving, so it's worth noting that coconuts are not in fact nuts. They're actually a fruit, but because they have an inner flesh paired with a hard shell cover, coconuts are considered drupes, also known as stone fruits. But just because coconuts aren't classified as actual nuts, that doesn't mean those with tree nut allergies don't need to be careful. The Food and Drug Administration classifies coconuts as tree nuts for labeling purposes, while in Europe they're not classified that way. Coconuts have the potential to have similar effects on those with tree nut allergies, such as itching, swelling of the throat, and wheezing. For some people, it could even be fatal. It all depends on the individuals consuming the coconut, their allergens, and the way that some of the proteins in the coconut can interact with a person to cause symptoms. While this type of allergic reaction may be uncommon, it's better to be safe than sorry before consuming coconut milk. When it comes to consuming food and beverages, typically we don't love to find out something is significantly high in fat. The amount of fat in a particular food item can definitely get a bad rap. But as it turns out, it's not quite the same deal for coconut milk. 1 cup of unsweetened coconut milk from a carton typically contains 4 grams of fat, with 3.5 grams of saturated fat. Meanwhile, canned coconut milk really packs in the fat with 12 grams per cup and 10 grams saturated. But don't just go clearing out the coconut milk from your pantry after hearing those figures. While it is true that most of the fat found in coconut milk is saturated, which we've been trained to think of as bad for our bodies, coconut milk contains a different kind of saturated fat. It's called medium-chain triglycerides, or MCTs, which means they can be metabolized by the body quickly and converted to energy. The jury is still out on the research here, as promoting overconsumption of saturated fats tends to be frowned upon. But when it comes to coconut milk, you may very well be consuming a different, better type of saturated fat that's more easily digested than other kinds. Coconut milk is one of the most versatile ingredients to incorporate into a multitude of recipes. Even if you're not a huge fan of coconut flavor, it's still a great addition to recipes to change the texture. And it also absorbs the flavor of other recipe additions very well. One of the most popular uses for coconut milk is for cooking soups or curries. It's a great base for a dish, as it can be customized with spices such as curry, garam masala, and turmeric. Adding vegetables such as onions, peppers, and basil is a popular choice as well. And keep the kitchen open because coconut milk can be so much more than just a dinner ingredient. Adding it to cocktails such as piña coladas or coconut martinis and fruit smoothies can make a huge difference in texture and flavor. Or for those of you with a real sweet tooth, it can even be used to make whipped cream or non-dairy ice cream. It's incredibly versatile, giving you the ability to make virtually any dish dairy-free. And for the most part, it allows for an even cup-by-cup substitution in a recipe. Long gone are the days of only using cow's milk for a latte. Of course, the popularity of using whole milk still lives on, as that's what consumers have gotten used to for years. But if you're worried that you'll never have a frothy latte again after finding out that you're lactose intolerant, think again. While options such as almond milk and soy milk can easily be added to a latte, coconut milk may be a better option for those looking for those stiff peaks of creamy froth. This is because coconut milk has a higher fat content than other milk alternatives. 1 cup of almond milk contains 3 grams of fat, while soy milk has 4 grams, which pale in comparison to the 5 grams of fat typically found in a cup of coconut milk. The goal with making coconut milk-based latte froth is to mimic what traditional cow's milk does as it's being steamed. Cow's milk froths well because the proteins and water found in it work together to form air bubbles, ultimately creating foam. As you froth milk, you need fat to keep the foam and bubbles stabilized. And that's where coconut milk comes in. With its high fat content, it's able to hold its shape better and longer, thereby making it a great choice for a dairy-free latte. Let's face it, coconut milk can get a bit expensive, especially if you're adding it to your coffee every morning and on top of cereal, you can go through a carton pretty quickly. And while buying it in a carton is as convenient as can be, there are options to make coconut milk on your own at home that you might want to try out.
Save some money, make things at home.
One economical option is to purchase cans of full-fat coconut milk and then add water to them. Since a carton of coconut milk is basically a combination of creamy coconut milk and water, purchasing a can and mixing in additional water can produce a similar option to what's found in cartons. You could also go the full DIY route and utilize a package of already shredded coconut to do the job. Combine the shredded coconut and water into a blender, let it sit for a bit, and then puree the mixture. Once blended, use a nut milk bag or a cheesecloth to strain out the leftover coconut pulp. That'll then leave you with some nice creamy milk to be used in any recipe.
Taking a drink. It's nice.